Hello, hello. Hey, there's the synchronization going. Okay, let's see what we got here. All right, I hear myself on this other stream, so that one's working. Okay, switch that up. Do that. Do that. Do that. Okay. Take that out. Add that back in. All right. I'm online. Well, hello, everybody. Wanted to talk about different spectrums of energy because it's such a sexy topic on Friday night. Yeah. Let's talk about electromagnetic spectrum, everybody. Oh, yeah. It seemed like a good topic. Body electricity and human energy. I know I talk a lot about this, but, it's because it needs to be talked about. And I just don't think it's being discussed scientifically and intelligently nearly enough. And so I'm taking the initiative instead of just complaining about it. Put it that way. Basically just realizing that, it's one of those things where I was confused about what the hell I should be doing relative to researching it. I'm like thinking, what should I get first as far as equipment goes if I'm trying to understand everything I'm talking about? And people would say to me, like, is this work or should I get one of these? What's the best meter to get? And I'm like, that's why I'm going to talk about that a little bit tonight. And I'm going to show you some material from if you haven't seen it, then this will be good. If you have, I don't know, maybe it's good just to have a review with me in it, even though I've done this maybe once or twice. And I think I've only done this maybe once with a few of the slides or a few of the presentations, but where I'll do, I might stop the presentation from time to time and then add some more material or add a little bit of whatever, because I've learned things since I've made that controlled offensive behavior defense intelligence agency analysis report. That was one of the first documentaries that I did on YouTube. And it actually has some of the best material that I've done, to be honest with you, because I was approaching it really directly at the level of, okay, I'm a person that was a radio frequency engineer and a system performance, optimization person in the wireless industry up until a certain point in time. What can I take with my individual experience going back in the industry, and what kind of terms can I locate that would be that I could understand and make interpretable to others outside of those terms, which is to say that I would look for things involving electromagnetic spectrum. I looked for things that I thought would tie electromagnetic spectrum to frequency, and trained mind control programs, for example. I was trying to find the links that people claimed existed using my knowledge to be a more effective researcher, to fine tune the search terms, I guess you could say. The same way, guys, you could, there's a way you can just go to Google and it's got the window right there and you just type something in pretty basic. But then there's the advanced search, which everyone should learn how to use in varying ways, because it can really help you quite a bit on the web, get unique results that others probably would never achieve without even if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to learn creating advanced searches on Google just gives you more unique results, just by, even if it's just a total, you screw up a parameter or whatever, you may accidentally find something relative to the term you're looking for that you normally wouldn't have found had you not done the advanced search. All right. Speaking of advanced searching, this is kind of what I'm trying to, I guess, get down to as far as what is it that I do, maybe that is different than others, that would make my services, I guess you could say, different or more, I don't know. When people ask me, all right, they want to know, okay, I'm concerned about the energy I'm feeling in this area. what should I get to measure it with? It's such a broad question. It's the kind of thing that I would have to, it's frustrating, I guess, because even in the technical industry, I would get questions that required, quite a few follow-up questions, nearly a questionnaire's worth of, follow-up questions to answer the person's question. And most people typically want you just to give them a simple answer to their question. They don't want more questions. And there's really no way of getting around it when it comes to energy and when it comes to spectrum and voltage and everything to do with the human body. There's so many different factors that could be influencing what's going on in any given area and what might be going on with a person's individual physiology, brain, their water frequency relative to other people's water frequencies, what might be going on with potential things being added to their food or drink, things of that nature that can all factor into causing people symptoms that are consistent with body electricity hacking, consistent with feeling drained of energy, consistent with, I guess you could say, things like, I mostly hear about and have actually been in systems where I've experienced very light tasing sensations that they're not just sensations. They'll actually, eventually start to burn your nerves. You'll start to see evidence that your nerves are kind of burning, like your skin kind of turns to leather near the areas where it hits you pretty hard. And so, these types of things are pretty esoteric in nature, and I've been asked to investigate them for people before. And, there's some risk involved there, folks, when you do these types of things. And so what I'm asking is, I do put in all my clips in the description. You can have ways of consulting with me. You can contact me down there for my expertise or services, with the understanding that, that you have to understand, folks, like, I spent 20 years in the industry. So, there's things that I can do for you remotely that are pretty cheap. But if you expect me to like show up at your location and things like that, just remember, like, there's travel required. There's, the day it takes, the hotel and everything like that. It's kind of strange. Like, I think sometimes a person might think if I travel 2 states to visit their location, the quote's going to be $200 or something like that. And it's not. I wish it could be. What can I tell you? I think if a person were local, there's a lot of these energy readings that you could do for a couple $100 if it was a local business in a local place. That means to say, like, you could get there in the same time like a local pest control person or lawn maintenance person could arrive at your location. See, it's a lot different dynamic when you have that kind of locality and then, the ability to do it. So I would just say, like, you can consider me a person that's more of like, I've just learned how to be like an anomalous energy specialist of sorts when it comes to the way it affects the body. I'm not a doctor, and I don't approach things at that level. And I don't claim to be, and I'm not going to give you solutions consistent with being a doctor, and I'm not going to ever do that. Okay, that's not my function. I don't do those things. So I would say don't ever approach me for that. Okay. Now that doesn't mean that I don't have, what you could say would be a gift for doing things that involve healing. That just means to say it depends on your opinion of how that all operates and functions. When it comes to psychoenergetics, bioenergetics, yeah, I mean, I'm pretty adept at those types of things. And the people that understand it and do measure it, I think that by now they must understand that I do have something genuine, as far as that goes. So what I'm trying to get down to is a level of where a person can then in turn say, all right, I do in fact have this going on as far as an energy signature goes. It's been validated. It's solid. I know this about, myself. I can place this on a website and go, I've been verified. I do these types of, activities. I was measured to have this type of energy signature using these types of equipments and devices. And then that could be another way for a person, for example, who offers, if you're a gifted psychic or an intuitive, it's just another layer of verification that would improve what you do. You know what I'm saying? As far as your marketability to people, that's something that I think exists, folks. I mean, like, there's been people that I know have these abilities and they're trying to earn a living from them. And I'm thinking to myself, part of what drove this idea, I guess you could say, was just the ones that I did know were legit. And then knowing that I have things legit going on. And I was thinking to myself, I don't like that there's so many people that just get on the internet and just do these really strange things, like going like, yes, I'm doing psychic surgery on you right now. I just removed an etheric cord and I casted a level 9 hex, reverse hexaspella castify on you. You're healed. $500. Oh my God, Guru, thank you. And like, how do you prove that that person really pulled that cord out of you? And okay, maybe you felt it. And if you did, then cool. Pay that person the $500. And I'm not going to say don't. But I mean, not necessarily, guys. But I've seen this type of shenanigans going on where I'm kind of going like, I don't know, man. I don't think that that's a thing, but that's all right. But there's this other person that I'll see that I'm going, wow, they have got something super powerfully psychic going on. I know what's happening. I've experienced something with this person's ability multiple times, like multiple people like this, I'm saying, like, but when I find these people, like, I go, okay, something's going on with them. They should have a level of validation that says, yeah, this person's really, these are the signs that not only can they say that they have ability, but these are provable markers that would demonstrate, kind of like an IQ test. You know, yeah, look, guys, an IQ test doesn't always prove how smart a person is either. There's emotional intelligence that can actually get a person a lot farther, I would argue, than a person that has a triple-digit IQ that has zero emotional intelligence. You know, and that's an important thing to have. You know, if you have all the book smarts in the world, but you don't even have the basics of, you know, of getting around when it comes to like the socialization or whatever, those can also be factors that prevent you from getting around in the world, even if you can process complex math problems like a calculator, you see, with your brain. Most people are going to say like, well, I've got a calculator over here, and when it comes to people, I'm going to find somebody I can socialize with. So your calculator brain doesn't always really help in those situations, is all I'm saying. You know, it's great to have, though. Seriously, I'm not saying it one way or the other, guys. It's just to say that you shouldn't always think of these things as like, yes, I'm totally blessed and I'm this and I have all these things going for me. No. I mean, humble yourself. We all should. Everybody should, if you have some abilities or whatever. But still, there's ways to verify people have unique energy signatures that are going on with them, especially with the GDV camera. And it really is, it's just taking photo discharge on your hands. I mean, it's called photography, guys, but it's not photography. It's literally just going like a quick little of a photostatic charge to your tips of your hands. And then that measures your full electrical flow throughout your body, and then produces a chart that looks like an aura, but it's not your aura, and it's not a photograph in the classic sense. So keep that in mind when I'm talking about some of those concepts relative to that. Like what you saw in my slide leading into this, that's what I generate with this type of camera that is, well, right here. So this camera is what I use to generate those images that I showed you. This is the BioWell, and it's a GDV camera. And you see, it's not nothing. I mean, it's got the lens, and you can see the mirror. You can see the mirror in there and everything else like that. So it does something. Okay, it's not. It does a lot. So let's talk about like that. What is that? Let's talk about energies and everything else like that, because that's really what I was trying to get down to at the crux of this presentation. Is that it's one thing to say that, okay, there's energy and, you know, okay, I got a meter, but do you know what to do with it? Do you know which one to use? Do you know why you're using it? Do you know why that meter is relevant and when you should use it and how you should report its results? These are all the things that you need a person for typically. If you don't, great. But if you do, that's why you need me. So, you know, that's why I'm making appeals now, guys. This is my expertise. I'm just saying this as it's not so much a commercial as it is just to let people know that, yeah, you can find my details down below. You can do Skype or like FaceTime consulting with me, you know, fee-based type things that way, or contribution-based things that way, or you can do things to hire me to go to your location. But again, keep it in mind, you know, we'd have to negotiate travel and things like that. But, you know, again, I'm very frugal. and I'm a person that wants to help. So, you know, I'll do my best to make things work for you, you know, with the understanding I got to earn a living is all. So, and keep in mind, guys, you can find my resume up on Twitter. It's pinned to my profile. If you scroll down through that thread that's pinned to my profile, you'll find my resume in there, and you can see all the years of experience that I have doing these types of things. Prior to doing like this type of energy measurements, I was literally doing things all to do with telecommunications, wireless communications. I know about electromagnetic spectrum and locating things within the electromagnetic spectrum from my work experience. I've done jobs that were pretty high level engineering, both in planning functions as well as troubleshooting and optimization functions of systems, as well as I was a repair technician for cell towers for a number of years. I did all the emergency response, things of that nature. So the ins and outs of measuring antennas, measuring cables, and things like that, this is where my work experience is just a little bit more than average, I would say, relative to this field, and why you may want to consult with me if you're experiencing some strange anomalies, and why I would be worth, you know, the money. That's all. Okay, guys, I'm not going to get too deep into the commercial aspect of it. I'll start talking about, you know, let's discuss like measuring electricity versus whatever, right? Because there's like different things you can do with that. You know, right? For example, many of you have probably seen these things, right? These aren't anything special. A lot of people have these in their garage to test your voltage, you know, make sure the batteries are working correctly. And then it has a digital display on it. You can plug your probes in here, and then you have your red and your black wires, and it tells you, you know, how many volts are maybe passing through your home's socket or something like that. Okay, so that's like measuring electricity, for example, right? And so, again, I'm not trying to be too 101 here or dumb it down, folks. I'm just trying to give you guys an idea of why when somebody says, what should I get? I go, well, you need a lot of things, you know. So here's another one. I'm charging it at the moment, but like these are called, you know, magnet. It's like the M and the E. That means magnetic, and E means electronic or electrical. Okay, and so this one in particular has a whole series of ranges. Like you'll notice that it has 5 hertz to 400 kilohertz, and then you can hop over to 50 hertz to 400 kilohertz, and then it has another setting that sweeps between 2 kilohertz. Let me take that out so it's not shining in your face. 2 kilohertz to 400 kilohertz. And each one of those is relevant. There's another one there that's for the 16 hertz, but that's only if you're in Europe would that be relevant. And since I haven't ever done any evaluations in Europe, I don't know what to tell you guys about how you would use that. So I skip past that one. But my understanding is that one's used for the rail system over there. There's like a lot of these trains that operate on a low hertz level signal, and that's useful for measuring that. So those in Europe, if you have one of these, that's why you would want to use that setting. Everything otherwise, it doesn't have much function. That's all. And then you may want to start like the really sensitive one here, the 5 hertz to 400 kilohertz. You'd have to really have your meter steady, for example, and things like that. Otherwise, you're going to get an unstable reading because it's going to fluctuate a lot. Once you get into those low hertz ranges, remember, guys, brainwave frequency is in that range, 5 hertz. You know, we can get down to that range. Your alpha state, typically, when you're not thinking about anything and you're just kind of dormant there, most people are about 10 hertz. So you'll see where that fits within that, you know, 5 hertz to 400 kilohertz. So you actually have things here that operate within brainwave that are searchable within frequencies, and or rather electrical frequencies and magnetic fields. Okay, electrical fields and magnetic fields, I should say, to be more apt. All right. And then over here on the side, you know, you got ones that'll measure the M field, the E field, and then, you know, like I can give you an example. The reason why some of these you might like better than others is because okay, you probably heard that, right? So ones like that, I'll turn it off so you don't hear. You ever see The Fifth Element, Chris Tucker? So that reminds me of that character. He's always like going, "Get away!" Fifth Element. It's a classic, guys. It is. It really is. It's a Bruce Willis classic. It's pretty decent, actually. I have to say, I might watch that one soon. Haven't watched it in a while. And then, all right. And then there's different types of meters that are more useful. Those of you who know me from the Basis Project, you're probably familiar with these. This is something that I think was kind of popularized over there as a useful meter in detecting some kind of esoteric things. I have to say, guys, for as many, I don't know if I always agree with how they're doing it or what they're doing, whatever. Like sometimes they'll have the meter and that piques my interest. So I start looking into, okay, what does that meter do? And should I have one, blah, blah, blah. And then maybe I disagree with the method used to measure it or whatever. Or I go like, well, how useful was what you just did? If you did it in that circumstance, that kind of thing, guys. I mean, people have those criticisms of each other's information, and that's completely valid. People have made it of mine too, and I kind of go, yeah, in a perfect world, I would have had that right, but I'm by myself, and I didn't have the ability to ground that properly or whatever, right? But I'll say something like, with that understanding, I'm also showing that there's something that's anomalous about the level there, blah, blah, blah. You know, again, guys, you have to like make certain degrees of considerations, especially when a person's working in a very limited budget and a very limited, well, no staff at all, really. But like these ones are the zap checkers. And so these ones kind of help you tune into some frequencies that are, that one's kind of good at like finding, what do you want to call it? Like signals that are in these like lower megahertz ranges that kind of make everything buzz and vibrate. It's really trippy. You can set that one on the ground and you set the sensitivity just right, and it'll follow the pattern of what the building feels like. It'll vroom, 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 vroom. So they're good meters, you know, as far as that goes. They can really detect some strange things. And I would say anybody can get one of those Allen Broadband ones. They're hard to get. They don't make them anymore. A lot of these analog meters. And then, so if you find something, then you're going to have to like locate what it is. And there's a whole bunch of different kinds of these, and these are like spectrum analyzers. And so then if you're trying to locate it, you're going to have to like zoom in and see if you can't, you know, I'll just show you really quick. Yeah, it's not going to show you much right now because it's not set up properly, but this is then like it'll start showing like a Bart's head. I'm gonna try to see if I can get it to show something a little bit more meaningful here. Not really at the moment, but anyways, guys, like you can kind of see it fluctuating a little bit. This one also, like these types of spectrum analyzers, you can plug into a laptop and create a better visual chart. And I've shown you guys those in the past. And I can create those visual charts for people to say, okay, not only did we find something, but then here's what it looks like. Here's probably what, you know, that frequency is assigned to, because this is how you learn what's the number of the frequency. It's one thing if you find your meter going and you know where it is about, you know, like some of the energy, you know where the range is coming from. But then you've also got to find sometimes, okay, what's the signal source and how do you do that? Well, it's a lot easier to get down to what it truly is if you can actually locate it with a spectrum analyzer. And there's software to find radios. They're called SDRs that do that too. I have some of those also that I can use to find things for people that get in the really, really low megahertz range. And that's where you're really finding that most of these devices are set up to not look in. And again, guys, this is why you need, and I don't mind, I'll share my expertise as far as these types of presentations, guys. I don't ever hide information from folks in that regard. But yeah, I mean, you know, you have to be looking for these low megahertz frequencies, especially the ones that are under 30 megahertz, folks. They're really hidden cleverly by a lot of different spectrum analyzers and devices. And they'll, if you sweep for those in particular, you're gonna locate those frequencies very often. They're like lily wave type frequencies. You'll see them like pretty close to 10 megahertz, not to be confused with brainwave frequency, which is 10 hertz. But 10 megahertz is consistent with like a lily wave type signal, and also the 9.9 megahertz, which is just under that, is used with wireless resonant energy link, which is a way to like kind of send like, you know, electrical signals wirelessly through the airwaves and charge devices, but it could also be abused and directed and aimed at people in ways that are malicious and make them feel like they're being, it just kind of messes with your body electricity and your body voltage. And so that's something that I can help with, because if that ever happens to a person, they may assign some other reason for it other than electrical signals, other than magnetic fields. And so I would just encourage people, like if you have a sensation like that, again, I'm not a doctor, but it may benefit you to know what the electrical signals are, what the magnetic signals are, what the subtle energies are relative to that. And then we get into more esoteric research. So everything I just showed you, for the most part, except for that first camera, is pretty standard, right? And then you have other types of meters like radiation. This is like regular, like X-ray, gamma ray, radon gas type radiation, right? That's that type. And then it's always good to have other types of EM meters. This is another brand manufactured in Russia. That's a pretty good one that has a nice visual display. It's pretty portable. So these ones have a cool display on them where you can do different settings, like that are custom for people that know a little bit less about, you know, that aren't experts in the field. It kind of helps you. So it has one in live area, and then one if you're like by a PC, and then it'll tell you if the level's too strong. I'm trying to make it go off, but this one's not showing too strong. Hey, I guess my PC's doing all right. I'm even putting it by the power thing. Hey guys, that almost never happens. That's really weird. Okay. I almost always set off the meter when I have it set to that. That's very strange. I sure feel something, that's for sure. All right. So now that we've had that conversation, then we get into like things that are more about subtle energy concepts, and then you're back to this. Now you're back to this photo discharge system where you look inside and you've got the lens. You can see in there. All right. And so this is where you're getting into the photostatic discharge GDV system. That's more like Carillion photography, and measuring something that's more of like a comparison of, this is when it gets a little difficult. It's a little bit like you're kind of doing like this sort of comparison against like total field relative to body field, and then your individual flow. And it's, I mean, I understand it. So let me, I want to try to find a way to make it a little bit easier to grasp for people though. So there's that device. And then some of you have seen that I've done in the field, and I can show you some of my individual reports. So I don't have to like, it's hard for me to replicate it here inside right now. But then there's these types of meters that are more for like life energy concepts, and these connect to different probes. So this one actually can connect to acupuncture probes. It can connect to soil measurement probes. It can connect to water frequency, not water frequency, but like you can plug into these probes up here, banana plug clips, accessories that you can do different types of tests with life energy. So like I have some that are like grips that you can put the banana clip in there, and you can find out based on you grabbing the grip, life energy concept based that way. That's something that I've kind of done individually with this meter actually, by putting together a few different kits of accessories into this thing. And so there's different things that I know how to do now relative to human energy, just to sort of test, you know, electrical flow and human energy flow in ways that I'm really excited about, because I was very cynical about these concepts before. I mean, keeping in mind, guys, I worked on cell towers. I'm not an easy person to hoodwink, because I've had professional equipment that costs more than a freaking BMW. None of this stuff is that expensive. This is all pretty, you know, it's inexpensive equipment for the most part compared to the wireless industry, guys. Wireless industry is all expensive. It's all things that are like literally as much as a freaking car to buy one piece of test gear. I know because I've seen some of that test gear like drop off of a ski slope before. I'm not joking. I won't tell you that boring long story, but I once, just to summarize it, the Cliff Notes version, haha. I once saw an Agilent HP Hewlett Packard like test gear device that was brand new. It was designed to test digital technology when we had just got it. Like this is the late 90s, early 2000s, early in my technical career. And we had to go up to White Pass, which is near Yakima, Washington, kind of between there and like I-5, I guess, between, you know, central Washington and like the interstate in Western Washington is White Pass. And you have to take all your gear up on a ski lift because they don't let you use the roads because you'll tear them up. It's like a requirement. You can't use the roads on ATVs or cars. They don't let you do it. So we had to take all of it. This isn't the Cliff Notes version, but I'll try to make it fast. So we had to take the equipment up, put it on the ski lift. Short story long, a whole debacle was made on the way back down with this test gear. We had only used it this one time. We had brought it all the way up to this ski slope to tune all these radios and everything like that and brought it down. And the guy was supposed to stop the ski lift with, you know, on the way down. And I was going to, you know, I jumped off the ski lift because they put me ahead. The gear was behind me, strapped to one of the seats behind me. And so what was supposed to happen is there's a guy that's in a station down there that stops the ski lift. And so again, I hop off like you're supposed to, and I'm waiting for this guy to do his part, and he doesn't do anything. And I'm watching my test gear that's like over $50,000. It literally, guys, that's how much it cost. It's over $50,000 for the test gear that I'm watching on this ski lift that we had just unpackaged and used in this one cell site at White Pass. And then it goes around the thing because I couldn't stop it from going, man. I mean, I'm only so big. I'm only so strong. This thing's huge. It's strapped in. You have to unhook it from the ski lift. Hey, guys, I have a second to do this. It goes around. And again, the straps were pretty good, but not enough to where this heavy piece of test gear can completely lift like a completely different, like 90 degrees up this way or whatever. And it's tilted. And I'm sitting there going, oh, no. And it just goes. Can you just imagine that, guys? I mean, can you imagine seeing a car roll down a hill that way? Like a 5 Series BMW that you just like bought and drove right to the ski slope to a technician's brain. That's what it was like. It was just like, no. Anyways, that's my long overdone story about seeing tons of test gear. Bad news anyways. And then if you're trying to get into subtle energies, right, then you get into, right, there's things that you can do within your human biofield that'll actually measure it individually so that you say, okay, I have this much electrical flow, and I'll show you those. Well, like I can show you those slides right now. I'm in the middle of doing a presentation on this. I'm going to upload a video on it, pretty soon. I've been getting all, I want to talk about it. Hang on. I didn't mean to talk this long tonight. I was going to do mostly the controlled offensive behavior report, but I'm glad I did to give you guys kind of an intro to these things here. But let's see here. I got to get these slides up. Hang on. I guess you'll get a preview here of what I'm doing. It's not really something, I mean, I'm mostly getting this from the reports that are auto-generated, so there's no genius here at all. It's just, I'm assembling it into something that I can explain. All right, here we go. All right, guys. So again, I'm not going to try to reinvent the wheel. So I'm just going to give you as far as like describing it. So I'll just give it to you straight from the material. The BioWell GDV camera is a revolutionary, non-intrusive way to measure human energy field using a specialized camera and software system. BioWell has been developed by the team of Dr. Konstantin Kuratov and brings the powerful technology known as gas discharge visualization, GDV, or electrophotonic imaging, EPI technique to market in a more accessible way than ever before. It was developed together with US partners. The product consists of a desktop camera and accompanying software which allows a user to quickly and easily conduct human energy scans. When a scan is conducted, a weak electrical current is applied to the fingertip for less than a millisecond. In response to the stimulus, fingertip emits electrons which are striking and exciting air molecules. Excited air molecules create gas discharge or glow. This glow is captured by the video camera, and then the digital image of the glow is processed by the BioWell software to show energy and stress evaluations. Each scan returns a wealth of meaningful information to provide you with a truly holistic view of the state of your well-being. The intersection of the fingertips glow created in BioWell software is based on the concept of acupuncture points and is verified by more than 20 years of clinical studies by hundreds of medical doctors and researchers with many thousands of patients. The scanning process is quick, easy, and non-intrusive. Get real-time feedback on factors affecting your energy state. View each scan in a variety of interesting ways with up to 9 result display options. All right. So I'm not trying to be like I'm not trying to necessarily read you the marketing material in the classic sense. I just want you to understand what the core concept is. I think these slides went out of, I don't think that they showed up properly. Yeah, here we go. Okay. BioWell presents analysis of the energy field and allows us to see its day-to-day transformation and the influence of different treatments, situations, and stimulus to the energy field, and hence to the condition of a person. Friendly software makes data processing simple and convenient for non-experienced users, and with the BioWell, you do not need to be a scientist to make a full-scale research. BioWell is being used by thousands of doctors, practitioners, and researchers worldwide, and it does not measure the anatomical structure of the body, but records functional, energetic conditions of organs and systems at the moment of measurement. BioWell analysis has the following outcomes: allows to define organs and systems of the body which need attention, makes assessment of the follow-up response of the body to different influences, treatments, emotions, mobile phone, etc., and provides information on psycho-emotional state and level of stress, anxiety. It also allows easy measure of response of the body to measure to different medications, supplements, and foods. So it's present in more than 70 countries. It's available a lot of different places. So it's not like it's a junk device or something or a toy, guys. It's definitely not Fisher Price. I've been using it for well about a month now. Yeah, and I'm pretty impressed with it personally. I'm not an easy person to impress with test gear generally. I tend to get pretty bored pretty quickly with test gear, but this one is impressive. But let's see here. I wanted to show what the value is, though, as far as like the meridians and things like that, because what you really get from this data when you really follow this through is it takes your photo right here at this spot, okay, when you put it inside the camera. So just to give you a quick what that translates to, guys, literally what you're seeing there on the screen, the way this is achieved is you do this. That's it. That's all that's going on here, guys. That's the photo. So there's nothing to be fearful of as far as that goes. The photo is not like, no, it's just doing this, putting your finger in there. Don't worry, it's not like Flash Gordon where you put it inside the hole and it goes like, grrr, and kills you or anything like that. This is totally safe. And then based on the profile of the discharge, it actually can tell you based on that profile where like the flare goes on the fingertip. That'll be a representation of electrical flow through these different meridians. And I got to tell you something. I was super impressed when I started seeing my data line up to it. Like any place that I had a physical anomaly, it was consistent with the reports that I was getting. So I mean, guys, when it's that conclusive, and I mean, I'm again, like I say, I'm not a person that's easy to impress. And I'm always looking for the gimmick. I'm always looking for like, where's the flaw in this, or where's the thing where I'm being hoodwinked or whatever. And I just couldn't find it on this one. You know, maybe it is, I don't know, but I don't think so. I'm comfortable with it at this point, based on the things that I've seen. So it's not just that it does this. Okay. So this is pretty cool in and of itself. It'll give you all these different diagrams. It kind of, you know, you can get a good idea of what this all means. And then it also provides you with comparison charts. So, you know, what I've been getting more inquiries about lately is, how do I know if something's benefiting me or not? Well, these are the ways. It'll be a visual representation in your chart here, that you'll notice that your flares around here will be more symmetrical. You'll get a more consistent, you know, like look at the difference between these two. For example, like here, you can tell that I had actually probably wasn't doing quite as well in this one, in this particular region, as I was over here. Look how more consistent this is. The flow is even. It's more of a consistent pattern. The ring is more consistent all the way around. Then you notice here, I have these like, you know, it's kind of indented. It's not nice and clean. It doesn't go all the way out to here like it does on this other pattern. And so these are the types of things that you can look into quickly and visually, but then you can drill down beyond that and go, okay, what does that mean? And then it tells you all your different meridians. Then you're getting back to, you know, these types of charts too, by the way. These will show you, like, for example, your energy field one day to the next based on that graphical chart, the different colors. So you'll kind of see like where the differences are if you start to zoom in on the charts. Like right there, stronger energy field. You can see where there's changes or where it's consistently like here, like, you know, this isn't anomalous for me. It's common for me to have this indentation inside my biofield, you know, so this would be something that I would want to look deeper into. And then I could drill down with the software and say, okay, what are the areas of attention here that I can maybe focus my, you know, treatments or go to my doctor with and say, hey, you know, maybe I need to look more into this because I am feeling something strange here. And then, you know, it'll show you actually based on this profile on the photo discharge. So, and then these are like the comparison charts. So say, for example, you wanted to show like, all right, I know every single time that these people go to my conference, they show up in an anxiety state. The ones that really are super stressed when they show up, they always leave with a completely feeling relaxed, like, you know, and everything else like that. And they always tell me how much better they feel. Well, wouldn't it be great if you had something that could actually prove it, that could actually say, well, not, I mean, yeah, guys, beyond the normal things. I mean, look, a person's individual wellness and this, the fact that they say so, that's enough. I mean, really, it is. But when you're really trying to get down to like saying like, well, why is that? I mean, you know, if you're really drilling past that and you're trying to answer like, why are these things the way they are? Why is it that if I bring all these people out to, you know, I don't know, this cave system and they all go in there, they always feel really good afterwards? Or in some cases, what happens if they go to a cave and they always feel weird afterwards? What if it actually has the opposite effect and they don't like how it feels in there? Then again, it's another way to like track and trace those things. Now we're getting into more of the environmental studies. Then you can start drilling down to, once you look at these types of charts. Sorry, I didn't mean to keep this up there like that. So this would be like stress charts, for example. And then you could see, like, for example, here, you could say like, all right, maybe you took measurement in orange at the beginning of your session of meditation, and then you took the purple one at the end of the session. Well, in this particular case, you might say, well, wow, guys, this is really not an effective treatment for me. You see, I came in feeling, pretty optimal, and I left feeling more stressed and in an anxiety state than I came in. And then to be like, well, how do you feel individually? And you're like, well, I don't know. Maybe I didn't like this treatment. Maybe it didn't really work for me. Again, not everything is going to be a tangible thing. And this won't necessarily always be the metric that quite proves it. But If your body's experiencing stress at that moment, it could also be a sign that the person doesn't want to leave the location that they're in too. There's that, right? So you want to make sure you get a lot of different measurements. I would say, you wouldn't just be like one measurement at the start, one measurement at the end. You'd want it to be more scientific than that, guys. You'd want to take all the factors in. So keep it in mind. Say, for example, it was a retreat, right? You would want to make sure you get like for like. Don't measure the stress state of a person when they arrive, which is going to be more like, I wonder what's going to happen here. I don't know many of these people, compared to when they leave, when it's like going, oh, I know these people a lot better and I'm more comfortable. Oh, I'm actually going to miss them. Boo-hoo. Because that adds something different. See, they're more emotionally bonded to the crowd. That there may be anxiety added at that point that wasn't there before. So you'd want to get like a consistent measurement, like maybe a couple times a day, or after certain activities that you knew were relevant to the minimizing of stress, and then take constant, day to day, and then do evaluations, and then learn how meaningful those comparisons are. I mean, again, these are all the ways that a person can just kind of drill down to find out, why do I feel better in certain places, or why do certain treatments affect me better than others, right? Relative to frequencies too, guys. What I'm trying to say is it's not just about overall wellness or sickness or whatever. We're in an environment that's increasingly more electromagnetic in spectrum in nature. It's all around us. It's everywhere. So more people are going to be experiencing anomalies relative to electromagnetic spectrum and aren't going to know where to go, because currently, right now, there's a huge gap in this. I'm sorry, guys. It's handling these issues in a very clinical, very not remarkable way. And my problem is I'm trying to show people what they really need, and they don't understand. That's half the problem. And because I didn't even understand. So touche, guys. I'm letting you know. I'm a 20-year radio frequency engineer that would have laughed if you told me that this thing that looks like it came from The Last Starfighter set, which it does, by the way. Anybody see The Last Starfighter? It's a pretty cool movie. Came out in the 80s. Has an excellent computer-generated imagery, special effects in it for one of the earliest forms of it, by the way. All right. Turn that air conditioner off. So, like, this is your stress levels, right? Before and after. So what you might want to do is, once you've determined that you have a unique environment where something is going on, either making you feel good or bad, now we get back to the other meters. What are the electromagnetic field signals in there? You might want to bring in a meter like this. Do you have higher than average electrical fields? Do you have higher than average magnetic fields? Do a good sweep of those things. Then you have to be able to interpret that data. And that's why you need people to help you, okay? Yeah, you can go buy all these meters. You can go get them and do this yourself. Do you know how to interpret it? Have you done the research to know how to interpret it? So this is where I'm different. Sorry, guys, I wasn't intending for this to be a commercial, but I do need to earn a living, so I'm not going to apologize excessively. I hope it's interesting, though, because that's the point of it. It's not to sell it to you necessarily or anything like that. It's just say that, like, yeah, there's ways you can measure things like this, for example, right? That's the other meter. So you have these types of meters, right? That'll tell you, like, hey, that's the wrong, that's German. Hang on, here's English. Whoop, there it is. All right, is my building safe for the sleeping area that I'm in? And then you get one of these meters out, and it'll tell you what these signals are. And then, an individual person can do this pretty effectively, right? That's cool, guys. Most people can get one of these things figured out with a card like this, and that's good. Then you at least know, do I have an elevated E field? Do I have an elevated magnetic field? And I want to encourage as many people that have that knowledge set, or even have a meter like that already in your home, just start sweeping in the places where you sleep. And then if you're seeing, higher than average, or your little meter's going beep, 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 then yeah, you got to do something. You have to do something to mitigate that. I can tell you guys from personal experience, if you have no control over your environment, one of the best protections you can get from electromagnetic anomalies is a wool blanket, a Pendleton blanket, or a wool, 100% wool, or a nice 80 to 90% wool blanket blend. Like a Pendleton is a really nice, soft form of them. That's one of the reasons why I recommend them, is because they definitely work for me. I'm telling you, I swear up and down by Pendleton blankets. I'm not doing any commercials or endorsements, I promise you. I wouldn't be ashamed to, though. That'd be one company I would definitely be like, sure, put me on the endorsement list. If they work, guys, then yeah, I'm going to encourage their use. And I'm telling you, Pendleton blankets they work amazingly. You would not believe how much they will mitigate symptoms relative to electromagnetic fields. I think it is the wool blend because the way it operates is that it's recirculating your orgone, it's recirculating your Loosh, your Chi, your Prana. And so your self-healing mechanism is kicking in, you see. And the wool is, instead of it all just escaping and flying all over the place, if you have an over amplitude factor, I think there's something about having that wool wrapped around you that holds more of your energy in and doesn't let it escape. So if you're having your Loosh leached, or your energy feels like it's being sapped, those blankets, I'm telling you, are like amazing at preserving your energy and getting you a nice rest, a good night's sleep. I'm telling you, they're very, very good. And so on that point, once you get down to, okay, I've checked out all the other things, and I just want to know, now that I see some comparisons here, how do I measure subtle energy? Then you're getting into these things, you know? You have been selected to protect the Kodan Armada. Anybody see The Last Starfighter? There's no Last Starfighters, not a single Last Starfighter fan in the room. I can't believe it. Can't believe it. I can't believe it. I'm very disappointed. No Last Starfighter fans. Or you're being quiet, because I know you remember that movie, because the villain, I'm not the villain, by the way. I'm the good guy. I'm the inverse. They must have been doing some weird law reversal with The Last Starfighter, I'm thinking. Just kidding. Because they made it seem like this is the bad thing and this is the good thing. This is actually really good. So this is how you measure. This is called the Sputnik sensor. And it has this banana plug in it, and it'll plug into the front of that camera. I showed you this right here. So this combined with this is where you start doing environmental studies, and then you start getting into more esoteric data. That's very similar to what I do with this meter here. Okay, the one I was showing you earlier. And that's the one I was using to measure the life energy of trees and things like that. And, you know, if I was feeling more experimental, like I would see if I would like try to consult with them a little bit to find out if I can plug some of my other sensors that have banana plit. That is such a... Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. I'm having a hard time doing my my verbiage here today, so forgive me. But yeah, so I wanted to kind of show you guys all the different ways of measuring energies, and that there's lots of different kinds, and there's ones that are known, like electromagnetic and spectrum, and then you're getting to things like this that are more, I would argue, things that involve your Loosh, your Chi, your Prana, those types of concepts that are usually associated more with Eastern medicine, or people here kind of scoff at, or they go like, hey, isn't it that Wilhelm Reich guy? Aren't those organite pyramids? Except they're not. Those things are corruptions of the whole concept. Pyramidal energy, guys, literally comes from like huge freaking pyramids, like large ones, like ones that were created to generate energy and tap into Earth energy and re-radiate it using the human body as a sort of conduit and an additional adder of plasma. Like, it's almost like the person that enters into the king's and queen's chamber add a factor of bioplasma to the machine that helps it operate. It's a little Stargate-ish in nature when you think about it. I mean, yeah, that's a movie, but yeah, that's kind of the Stargate aspect. Yes, Stargates are both, not to get too science fiction on you guys, because there's literal Stargate type information, but they're humans, they're people, and they're a physical location both. That's what Stargates are. Like, you can find the basics of this in those pyramids, king's and queen's chamber. What is that not but a physical location combined with people? So who goes in it matters, and what they do in there matters, and where that location is matters. That's all. That's relative to a Stargate. So yes, some of those pyramids are quote Stargates, but there's other places that are Stargates that don't look anything like that. Some are just a notch in the wall that somebody stands in, things like that. Just to be straight up. I study these things on maps for all over the place, guys. So sorry to get too deep into those types of concepts, but And I'm not your average person when it comes to that information. It's I'm studying it more from a government documentation perspective and not like a, I don't have stories of space and things like that, is all I'm telling you. No offense to anybody who does, really, because I think there are some people that have experienced some legit phenomenon, even if they were tricked, but they did experience something. And so when somebody experiences something, I'm not going to tell them that their experience was inauthentic when it was real to them. See, this is the problem that I have with a lot of the information that's been going on, or even something these like my lab type events where people feel like they got abducted by an alien or something like that, or that they're having communication with them when they're really just talking to some goon at a deep state lab, or it happened through some deep state lab that just decided that you were a person that they wanted for some genome, test or something like that, and didn't want to ask for permission. And so they gave you some realistic experience that inside your brain, that your brain's processing it as, quote, an alien, but it wasn't. You were just kidnapped by some people that did something to you, and they just dumped you out, and they made you think that it happened that way. And again, the guys, if I hadn't read so many reports about who specifically does these things and where it leads back to, and that there's always traceable activities to them, and they weren't connected to somebody that I knew, I wouldn't even be saying this to you. I'd be more like leaving the topic alone entirely. It's just that they can do a lot of fancy things to mess with people's perceptions. There's that Peter Piper picked a pepper thing again going on. Anyways, that's why I say having a range of knowledge relative to the way energy works, the way energy flows is a good thing, And I'm here. If I'm a person that you're interested in consulting with, just you can find my details inside the description. These are all charts and things that I'm capable of producing and measuring. I have all the equipment to do it, and I am for consulting, for whatever in types of things. And yes, guys, this includes like if you just experience weirdness at a location, you don't know why. These meters can give you reports that'll explain it, maybe perhaps to your satisfaction. I mean, it won't necessarily be a conclusive thing, but it's an experimental energy report that actually has tangible results. I've done many of them now on my own to know that they do actually measure something. I try to do things like that I know, like when I experience an internal energy spike that are predictable, that I can measure relative to energy. So like, if I want to find out if I can remotely influence this meter, I make sure I have an event that'll prove it. That's all, And so that would include like a large psychoenergetic event, scaring myself or going into deep prayer or whatever the case is. There's a lot of different ways where you can get a predictable energy spike and find out if you can remotely influence the environmental meter. And I'll just put it this way. I've done enough of those environmental tests and to know that this thing's measuring something, and it does measure human energy, how it affects the environment relative to wherever this meter is placed. It's trippy, which is to say that you can put this inside a room, and the people that enter the room will affect the output of this, what this meter measures. Okay. You ever hear like sometimes a person says like, God, dude, every time that person's over here, they just freaking suck my energy, man. What a downer. That some people like Debbie Downers. They suck my energy. Some people literally will suck your energy, man. That's what they're doing. They're literally sucking your energy. And I'm just telling you guys, like something like this will actually tell you that there's something anomalous going on. Isn't that trippy? Wouldn't that be weird? Wouldn't it be weird for like you to actually go like, hey, that person that's always draining our energy every time they come over here? Let's get out the Sputnik sensor and prove it. So you have the thing running in the background, Debbie Downer shows up to your party. The meter starts going, Or maybe everybody gets agitated and the anxiety level goes way the hell up or whatever. I don't know. And then you measure everybody's biofields afterwards, and they're like going, oh, my energy reserve is way down. Damn it, that Debbie Downer. We don't have to go negative, guys. That's one form of it. What about the people that make you feel good? What about when you're in a spiritual center? Sorry, guys, I didn't mean to be that way, but it's funny, it's humorous, it's a way to approach the next topic. What about church? What about a temple? What about a synagogue? What about wherever it is that where is your sanctuary? Where is your special place that when you go there, you always feel amazing, that you individually know that that's the place. And you're like, I don't know, here something's going on here that's different than any other place in the world. And then what if you learned What if you learned that you could prove it? What if you learned that you could show that there's something radically different about what's going on there with an energy signature associated with it, just like you would find on a magnetic meter or an electrical meter or something else like that? Well, that would be pretty compelling, I think, especially if you're trying to demonstrate that an area is special and people experience feeling better as a result of going in and out of it. That's one of the reasons why I was trying to play you guys that as much as I could of the things from the Bosnian pyramid when it came to that energy study. So you could kind of see how you have an energy reading taken with the meter with a Sputnik sensor like this. And then they can show you that that area that they've demonstrated that nearly everywhere surrounding those pyramids has a quote healing or wellness effect on the people. Then they integrate this data that you see over here to my right. Okay, so this shows the environment is special, and then that data is measured with. So yeah, these two things measure the environment together. Okay, together it does it. This plugs into this. All right. But then you put your fingers into here, and then it'll tell you what your electrical signal is using the exact same method. You understand that? So it's a really reliable comparison of how is the environment energetically relative to the persons that enter the environment energetically. How do they improve or don't improve as a result of going in and out of said environment? So, that's the whole point here. So now, when it comes to this whole idea about measuring biofields and what does it take to prove these things, I struggled with this for many years, and then when I started running into this research, I guess last summer, studying Bosnian pyramid and some of Uvarov's research, and then seeing how a whole bunch of these researchers were using GDV and Kirlian photography technology like this, I was really excited because I've been wanting to get Kirlian photography for a long time. So I think that's a good way to transition into the controlled offensive behavior report before the night gets far too long. I want that to be the crux of what I play going forward with minimal interruptions. So I will answer some questions in between for folks if they need, but for the most part, I'm going to be going back and forth to this controlled offensive behavior material. I'll play a couple parts of it that I think are relevant, especially to Kirlian photography, because these are all things, guys, that, I want folks to take this seriously because the military did. And the military wanted to know everything about this back in the 70s. They were very, very serious about studying Kirlian photography. Now, why? Why were they interested in it if it's just a bunch of bogus, like, oh, whatever, your aura? It's not, guys. It's technically not even your aura. So if I've ever used that term excessively, I apologize. This is your biofield, all right? But it does look like an aura. I get it. All right. Let me get this material up. All right. I'm going to avoid Montauk, I think, that topic for now, and get down to one of these. All right. Magnetoencephalograph, hive mind, UHF, natural communication paths relative to, okay, the Wilhelm Reich. And bioplasma. I'm going to start here. But folks, I would recommend, like, if you're ever interested, you should go through all the different parts for this material in particular, because it is kind of relevant, but I need to get through the things more consistent with the Wilhelm Reich, his study of bioplasma, the biofields. Keep in mind, guys, I had no meters to measure these things with when I wrote these original reports, so I may interrupt them to correct them briefly, and then I'll just kind of bounce back and forth. So, All right, this is part 3 of Controlled Offensive Behavior. It's a Defense Intelligence Agency report that gets deep into all these topics about frequencies and their effect on the body, whether for weapons or telepathy or psi research. This was actually one of the most comprehensive reports I ever read, and there's a whole bunch of different iterations of it in varying states of redaction. So I'll remind you guys that you may want to find all the different variations on them and see if you can combine them into one report, because that's what I did. Not necessarily that specifically. I just observed that some were very complete and others were heavily redacted. So if you find one, you may find another one that's less redacted is all, if you're doing your own research. And you can find that on CIA.gov if you feel so bold. That's entirely up to the individual, I guess. But, you know, yeah, it's at your own risk, obviously, going to the CIA's website. If you want to get bit by the piranha, it's up to you. All right, guys. Just making jokes there. All right, I'll be back.
Okay, welcome back. This is part 3.
To that same.
We're going to discuss bioplasma and Kirlian photography. Frankly, I'm not sure of the exact pronunciation. And also, this is going to tie into Wilhelm Reich and concepts involving orgone and how that might connect to bioplasma. Before we get into this, though, the reason why I'm bringing up Wilhelm Reich at all, even though he's not a part of this actual DIA report, is because I just keep seeing repeated references on a lot of these documents about bioplasma, research into bioplasma, into chi, things of that nature involving a more etheric energy that's not electricity as we know it, where you're used to having a positive and negative with a black wire or red wire. You know, there's things that we've become used to associating with electricity. So, that you can measure volts. You have a voltmeter, you can go say that's 12 volts, 5 volts, whatever. But when you're dealing with the bioplasma and the orgone, the methodology behind measuring it, what those increments look like, what you'd even call those units of measurement, that's when things get a little bit, I guess, difficult, right? Because how do you prove something unless you have a unit of measure? And how do you establish a unit of measure in the current scientific community climate, I guess you could say? So there are people that are developing devices, but I don't really want to get into a lot of theory because I haven't had the opportunity to get into these things myself in great detail. I have been using things that are considered to be orgone devices that involve a combination of crystals and copper. Some involve electricity, others claim to be scalar devices, but I'm not going to get into that here in this particular presentation, except to say that based on my own studies and things that I've done in purely hypothetical, non-measurable environments, I have seen differences that would actually demonstrate that a lot of these things have some validity to them. So before I get into that, though, a quick review of where we were involving this Phoenix project, right? You're going to have to go way back to the first part here, okay? So these experiments here, right, where we discussed these radio sonde devices, okay, because you're going to want to do a little bit of refresher on this before we go. Or if you haven't seen this part of the presentation that preceded it, you're going to want to become familiar with this material, because we're going to discuss Wilhelm Reich and the Phoenix Project, how this all ties into, this aspect ties into with using these devices, this network, I guess you could say, the underlying network that makes some of this bioplasma possible. Now, these are hypotheticals we're dealing with here. So if you're following along in the document, this particular page that deals with bioplasma and Kirlian photography is on page 33. And so I'm going to read this really quick, and then I'm going to start jumping into the Wilhelm Reich and the connection to Phoenix Project and Project Rainbow. Okay. So I'll just read through this really quick and just do some highlights. 4 and 5 are less important. 6 is the big one that we want to pay attention to. But just to give you a little bit more background, it says cosmonauts, when in orbit, seem to be able to communicate telepathically more easily with each other than with people on Earth. A PSI, which is short for Psychic Faculty Training System, has been incorporated in the cosmonaut training program, but the news provided no further details. Some informal reports relayed to Ostrander and Schroeder indicate that the Soviets are working on psi systems for space use, involving not just telepathy, but also precognition. Yeah, pretty trippy, huh? So, you can kind of draw some conclusions right there that if you're in an environment that is not polluted with ultra high frequencies, that psychic ability, psychic function, things like telepathy, precognition are possible. and they seem to be less inhibited. So I think you can draw some pretty clear correlations there. When these things are all flying around us, these frequencies, there seems to be I guess you could call it just interference, right? Just why the same way that two networks that are using the same frequencies that do not talk to one another are just going to interfere with one another. That would be the same thing with technology and human consciousness or human telepathic abilities. We have a technology interference barrier until they establish handoffs between us and the technology. So if you're doing the studying, you can kind of determine that that's what they've done. They're making them to where they don't interfere with one another and they coexist, but through I guess you could call it a digital matrix. So let's get a little bit lofty. We're talking about a totally different topic. So let's kind of get back to this involving the bioplasma because it's still relevant, right? Or rather, that piece is still relevant to this. So section 5, it says Kogan's systematic parapsychology research could also be a potential value to the overall Soviet cybernetic research and development program. And remember that term cybernetic, if you need to go back and get a refresher, it's in the last section. Efforts being made to optimize sensory inputs in the interest of controlling the quality of human motor activity are well known, as is the ultimate Soviet goal of achieving a perfect cybernetic man. So they were interested in controlling human motor activity. I don't know what else you call that. They wanted to give the ability to turn a human into a robot and to provide, pain or relief, the ultimate anger or, height of elation. They wanted to be able to control it. It is of interest that both conventional psychology and parapsychology programs are headquartered in Moscow, although, as depicted in the personnel and institution section, the trend is decentralization. It is probably no coincidence and supports the view that the latter program should not be taken lightly. It's funny that he talk about how it's decentralized and everything, because I think you'll see that a lot in the States too, is that's one of the ways that they're able to keep a lot of this work undercover. And one of the reasons why I think these things are derided in Wikipedia, when you start looking up these things in Wikipedia, they always call them pseudoscience and they sort of trash on it, and they very seldom offer specific numbers that are conclusive. So I think even though I cite Wiki a lot of times, I want people to understand it's only because I'm trying to find just some sort of common point of reference that's sort of, I guess, global. But keep in mind, too, that those databases are very heavily edited by just about anybody. And there are people that's their full-time job, is just to edit those entries. So again, I do use them, but I would like people just to use them as a framework to go do their own research, to just kind of use them as general definitions. But especially when you talk about Wilhelm Reich, Wikipedia really tends to kind of do a hit piece almost. So I'm not here to tell you Wilhelm Reich is good or bad or anything like that, but certainly what he was doing was relevant. Otherwise, they wouldn't have gone to such lengths to do things to him. So before we get into Wilhelm Reich, let's finish this up. It says, as mentioned above, the Soviets seem preoccupied with the search for energy that carries or facilitates telepathy transmission. Is it electromagnetic or not? That's key, right? Because we're talking about bioplasma in relation to orgone. This is something that they had as a big question mark. And then a lot of people pretend this is still a question mark, but I think that's merely to the general population. There's probably people who have figured this out quite well. The search for this unknown energy has led the Soviets to Kirlian photography, named after its inventors. The Kirlians developed a technique of photographing with a high-frequency electrical field involving a specially constructed high-frequency spark generator tuned up and down between 75 to 200,000 electrical oscillations per second. The first photographs showed turquoise and reddish-yellow patterns of flares coming out of specific channels within the leaves. A magnified picture of a finger showed craters of light and flares. By the 1960s, research on bioluminescence revealed by Kirlian photography was going on in many Soviet universities. Perfected techniques of photographing the play of high-frequency currents on humans, plants, and animals, as well as on inanimate matter, have set the Soviets on some striking discoveries about the energetic nature of man. Bioplasma is a term coined by the Soviets for bioluminescent phenomenon or energy. So I think that's a really good part here, to really kind of focus on before we get into the next section. So bioplasma is a term coined by the Soviets for bioluminescent phenomenon or energy. Okay, so scientists found that the illnesses tend to show up in advance as a disordered play of flares from the bioplasma long before they manifest in the physical body. So, they were able to determine that before the person actually felt it, you could see through Kirlian photography the diseases beginning to manifest internally. It's pretty interesting. This is according to Ostrander and Schroeder. The Soviets may be attempting to link Kirlian photography with computers, among other things. to instantly analyze the spectra of colors appearing in varied colored flares in the body. You can be certain that's been done by now because this paper was written in 1972. So, sorry. All right, so let's talk about Wilhelm Reich, right? So that's the only page we're going to cover in the report, so you don't have to worry about having that in front of you now. But so let's go into this here really quick. The Phoenix Project actually gets its start in the late 40s. It was an attempt to control weather. This is from Bibliotecas, by the way, and I think this is culled largely from Preston Nichols' work in the Phoenix Project. So you'll probably find a lot of this info in the book. So Reich is said to have been a brilliant man, credited with discovering the highly controversial orgone energy. Orgone energy is also known as life or orgasmic energy and is very different from more ordinary electromagnetic energy. So again, making a distinction between what we commonly refer to as electromagnetic, which deals with electricity and magnetics, space-time, and this other etheric energy that he considered to be more life-based or through the human orgasm. He claimed that orgone energy could cure cancer, a finding that didn't find wide acceptance with his colleagues. Reich also stated that orgone energy has related to quote-unquote cosmic energy and with the Newtonian concept of the ether. Needless to say, his theories were widely criticized by his fellow scientists. The ether is a Victorian concept that refers to a hypothetical substance that suffused all of space. It served as a medium for light and other forms of radiant energy. This ether was a popular concept and was used by more than one science fiction writer as a way to explain space travel. For example, E. Doc Smith sprinkles references to the ether all through his Lensman novels. With further research, Reich found that orgone energy was responsible for storms and bad weather. Dead orgone or deadly orgone, or DOR, was the term used to describe the dead energy found within the violent thunderstorms and hurricanes. The dead energy was also found within people as well. Active people had plenty of orgone energy, while those who were depressed or sullen had an excess of DOR energy. So I think you should ruminate on that a little bit, because especially when you deal in the psychic community, you hear people discuss energy harvesting and this notion that you have people that are sort of intentionally placed in trauma states, or there's a culture of trauma or a culture of stress that's intentionally designed to extract this DOR energy. And so if you feel like that's a plausible notion, then you would have to ask, what would be the use for the extraction of that DOR energy? Well, they were doing weather experiments, mind control experiments, so you can kind of get an intuition about what that was really about, right? If you're extracting this deadly orgone, if you have a population of people that manifest DOR energy instead of POR, right? So DOR is what you get from just being lazy, from being dormant, from not getting enough sunlight. So we basically made a lifestyle that is reinforced a deadly orgone harvesting matrix when you really think about it. And that's the only reason why I'm trying to bring this up here when we talk about bioplasma, because again, people talk about our energy harvesting, but are there mechanics to it? Are there actual 3D reality things that we can assign to these methodologies behind DOR extraction? So if you agree that this is a plausible theory, then we have to talk about this next part again and then review the material that we've already discussed, okay? After extensive research, Reich finally developed a device that would break up concentrations of DOR energy. When set up with a weather balloon, this device would dissipate or deflect thunderstorms. Armed with Reich's Stormbuster, the U.S. government created a device called a radiosonde. This device consisted of several sensors and a transmitter that could broadcast across several bands to build up ether, to either build up orgone energy or disrupt DOR energy. With it, the government could control the weather. It should be pointed out that any device capable of transmitting both orgone and DOR energy could be used to affect people as well. It is possible that the Phoenix Project was also looking into methods of population control. Supposedly, the Soviet Union had conducted extensive experiments on selected populations by broadcasting orgone or DOR energy into the area to try and alter the emotional content of the population. So yes, DOR does have a correlation to mind control because you're dealing with an etheric energy that is robbing you of your life force. It is a form, I guess you could say, or at least a relative, I think, hypothetically, of this thing that they call bioplasma or chi. So just to get back really quick so you understand that there is a method behind this, what he talked about with radiosondes. Remember, this is a radiosonde. This is all part of the mechanisms that make radiosondes work. This is what it looked like when Preston Nichols was writing about it, and this is what it looks like today. All right, just a little bit more in this section. So let's talk in a little bit more detail about Kirlian photography, because I'm not an expert in this, okay? So I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on it. I don't know a lot about ultraviolet, IR, and Kirlian photography. So I just called these little bits here because I believe there is a connection between bioplasma and some of what people call like aural or aura photography, Kirlian photography, and people's auras, and how this relates to this diagram here.
Okay, guys, keep in mind that, you know, that I made that years ago, and I did not have one of the cameras yet, and I do now. And so that's what's changed since I made this article. So I'm sitting here kind of going, I don't know this much about that. Yeah, I'm still learning, but I know a lot more now. So just forgive my kind of fumbling over it with this article is all I'm telling you guys, and I'll put it back on. Not so much my ego, just explaining why it may seem a little bit out of sync with what I'm talking about now, because I did this material about 4 years ago.
So please keep this in mind as we're having this discussion, right? This diagram involving DOR, POR. Your emotions, your thought form energy, how much exercise you get, how much light you get, all plays into this, right? Because it's part of mind control. You could create a loop of energy if you think about it. So Kirlian photography is a collection of photographic techniques used to capture the phenomenon of electrical discharges. So we already discussed this in the other part. I won't get into this, but here's an example of what that looks like with two coins, right? You can see there's like a life force that sort of emanates from these metals. It says that Kirlian believed that images created by this photography might depict a conjectural energy field or aura, thought by some to surround living things. Kirlian and his wife were convinced their images showed a life force or energy field. So people were investigating these methods, and you can still find places to do Kirlian photography today. But again, these things kind of wind up in the New Age field and kind of marginalized and pushed aside. So there's only certain communities that really get into these things. And meanwhile, you have people that have more engineering backgrounds who really kind of, you know, if they understood that there's engineering concepts that are underlying these things, they might actually give them more credence, validity. You might actually find these things more adopted on a larger scale. So as long as we're talking about this, and auras and chi, right? Because, and actually this is interesting. If you go on to CIA.gov FOI library and look up QI, G-O-N-G, Qi Gong, they did a lot of studies on this, okay? So this all relates, I believe, to Kirlian photography, auras, and bioplasma, and what the research of Wilhelm Reich was discussing, because scientists such as Beverly Rubik have explored the idea of a human biofield using Kirlian photography research, attempting to explain the Chinese discipline of Qigong. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. Qigong teaches.
Again, guys, keep in mind, I have said camera. Okay, so what I'm explaining to you guys is I've used it, and I think it's a valid form of measuring. Okay, and let me explain something to you. The thing you're going to learn, and I got those slides, and I do this a lot. Okay, I first start by showing you something from Wikipedia and what it says. Wikipedia, when it comes to these life energy concepts, pretty much always steers you off and goes like, it's pseudoscience, guys. It wasn't really valid. All these skeptics said, all the critics say, don't look, don't look. Ooh, boo, boo, boo. So no, guys, I'm telling you that that's actually Qigong research and things like that, and identifying like its validity, very, very statistically significant using this type of device. What Rubik's research would be doing, in my opinion, would be the way to measure it. I don't personally know of many better ways that you could, aside from maybe integrating these types of devices on acupuncture points, would be another way to show the effectiveness of Qigong. Because I can tell you guys from personal experience that I've had a variation of Qigong used on me, and I had I had somebody teach it to me, a different variation of Qigong on how to apply it to others. And it's pretty amazing. It's just a very subtle, how do I describe it? There's ways that like you're in a relaxed position. It's almost like consistent with like the same way that you would have like a chiropractor do things combined with like a massage, but it's not really like a massage. Like, get this type of thing like in repetition. It's not like that. It more operates on not even quick, how do I say it? Short movements that are not very long in duration. that involve like, so say you have a tense muscle and it's right here on your shoulder blade. You're laying on the massage table with your face down, and there's quiet, everything's quiet energetically. And the person would take like right around here in these regions where the energy is strongest, which is consistent with this type of photography device. That's why it's such a, what Rubik is doing actually is pretty, I never really even, honestly, guys, I had no clue that that was inside this presentation until just now. And now I realize that, yeah, she's one of the people that's on the list that does that camera. But I would say that now that I've had my own time with the same device, that, yeah, that's a good way to do it. Personally, again, I don't have her years of experience or know-how or whatever to say it from the same level of like, college educated type things or whatever. But in my opinion, based on what I've seen relevant to human energy and my experience with it, that's a good way to measure the effectiveness of something like Qigong or another type of method that's very similar in nature to, that would be involving the flow of energy and maybe some subtle muscle manipulation, even if it was just standard chiropractors or whatever, that would still be a good way to measure results, I think, because of how it does specifically address, like, I guess you could say, signal flow. This is why I'm impressed with it as a person that did wireless engineering. It's one of the only things that I can think of that applies really tangible scientific concepts of energy flow relative to, things like Qigong or, meditation, prayer, going to sanctuaries, things like that. Because some of these places, it's a combination of things. Number one, sometimes you just simply feel better when you're there because it's a beautiful place. Oh, wow, I went to this sanctuary. It's very nice there. That makes me feel better. So as a consequence, my stress level's lower. But there's other places where you can go where you would measure, okay, so maybe you measure the energy there and you take this meter. And so you not only find out that you go to that location, right, but that your internal physical self improves as a result. Your stress level lowers, your anxiety levels lower, whatever, right? And your energy reserve improves. You go, well, why did that happen? Is it just because I liked it? Well, that's, if you're asking why after you learn, and you're digging deeper, then you get into this meter, which is kind of funny. I want to show you something really quick because this just made me laugh. Since I told you guys it resembled a movie, but that's when you get this meter out before I get too distracted with my humor here. Hang on here, guys. Got to get my thing back. But yeah, but if you're looking for the reason why, then you start getting into this meter, which, like I said, looks a lot like the if you ever saw this movie, check this out, guys. Not that I'm drawing any correlations here, but oh wait, hey, wait, there it is. So you got to admit, guys, like, what the hell, dude? Should I pose? Anyways, I thought that was funny. This isn't a bad one, though. This is a good one. I promise you, it's not a weapon. Tough crowd tonight. Man, I tell you what. All right, back to this.
Is that there is a vitalistic energy called Qi that permeates all living things. The idea of Qi as its own sort of field, not simply a creature's electromagnetic field, has been mostly disregarded by the scientific community. So this constant theme, you notice, right? If you can't measure it with a voltmeter, an EEG or an MEG, it just doesn't exist. But we know it does. I personally believe it does, and I believe that Qi and life force and bioplasma personally. I think that a lot of it is belief-based, a lot of it is thought form-based, because your thoughts become things.
Yeah, which
so
transfers
to conclude this one here. In parapsychology, spiritual practice, and aura is the field of a soul.
It's not just that thoughts become things, you guys. It's a process that involves you believing in something or not believing in it, programming your plasma platelets that separate from your blood. And they can externalize from you with electromagnetic scalar type signals. They can literally be extracted from you, and things can be sent to them using that type of technology. You have programmable platelets within inside your DNA, inside your blood. That's the thing that I've been learning about that I think is pretty fascinating, that I'm trying to get to a deeper state of provability on, similar to like what these types of devices do. So again, guys, I'm sure it could probably get similar types of critiques and everything like that. But think about the fields that we're existing in here. What do you measure this with? See, this is what they'll always do. They'll say that those things don't really exist and there's no way to measure it. And then you'll produce like 3 or 4 different ways of measuring it. And they'll be like, then they don't really know what to do, guys. That's why I keep trying to push this issue and everything like that. I'm trying to be a little bit more like, not aggressively or whatever, but just say like, a lot of these people are doing good research, and it should be defended and it should be validated. And if it's valid, in my estimation, this is definitely valid. It's a definitely valid way of looking into it.
Subtle luminous radiation surrounding a person or object, like the halo or aureola in religious art. The depiction of such an aura often connotes a person or a particular power or holiness. It is said that all objects and all living things manifest such an aura. Often it is held to be perceptible, whether spontaneous or the practice. Such perception is at times linked with the third eye of Indian spirituality. Various writers associate various personality traits with the colors of different layers of the aura. It has also been described as a map of the thoughts and feelings surrounding a person. So similar to a chakra system. Then now you start getting into like things involving the pineal gland and the chakra system. And now you can start drawing real life correlations that have numbers. You can start saying, okay, these are all different sections of the body. They operate on different frequency fields. Every individual has a different frequency signature based on metals in their blood. Some people have more copper-rich blood or iron, whatever it might be. And those things will all affect this, right? Your aura field. It'll also affect the way that you rebroadcast signals, right? Because if you're familiar with your cable television or any coaxial cable in a cell tower is lined with copper. So like you probably heard Rh negative people have higher concentrations of copper blood. I'm not sure if I'm wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. Or I have that correct. But you kind of see this energetic field here, right? And how this all ties into what we're talking about. You have an aura. You have bioplasma. You have POR, DOR. And your thought forms, your emotions play into it. It's a cycle. You have spheres. And when you think about this in terms of energy harvesting, say, for example, somebody came up with a methodology behind not only extracting this, but storing it, then redirecting it. And that's when you start getting to where this gets really interesting, because there are antenna arrays like HARP, right, that purely just broadcast straight up into the ionosphere. So you have to ask yourself, what is the purpose of that? And again, I don't know, I really don't know what HARP is. I can only speculate. There's an official explanation, but I know that when you point antennas up into the ionosphere, meaning you're just pointing an omnidirectional antenna and beaming it straight up into the sky, there's probably a reason for that. So think of this antenna here, right? Is this just mimicking what this person's doing? Are you just sort of creating a constant series of these unity gain spheres that just keep going around and around and around and bouncing off the ionosphere and just creating this loop of energetics? So when you talk about raising your vibration, lowering your vibration, there's something to this, right? Lowering your frequency, raising your frequency, creating a higher vibratory state, because really we're all contributing to this energetic grid that involves DOR and POR, right? This is something we're all contributing to. This is the hypothesis. I think it's worth discussing. So thanks for sticking with me on part 3. I know I kind of bounced around there a little bit, but it's kind of necessary before we start digging heavier into the concepts of mind control on military leaders, populations, and individuals, because you kind of have to have a thread that basically explains the underlying technology so that you understand that we're dealing with something that isn't an etheric energy, but I think it's made possible through a mix of electromagnetics, if that makes sense. So if we're talking about Phoenix Project, we're talking about Project Rainbow, we know there's methodologies for creating circumstances that are more quote-unquote DOR friendly environments where you can generate more of this energetics. And it seems to me like that combination of 1,680 and 403 megahertz or somewhere in that range is what makes this possible. And I've measured these signals myself. So, you know, there's something to this. What it precisely means, what it actually is, whether it be positive, destructive, I don't know. But the evidence is there, and it's definitely worth exploring further. So that's my hypothesis for now. There's going to be more parts to this. We're going to keep going. It's going to get a lot more in depth here soon. So thank you for sticking with me, and looking forward to part 4. Have a good day. All right, welcome to part 4, section 2. Now we're going to get into mind control, extremely low frequency, and how this sort of connects to these other concepts involving the flower of life and mass resonance. It's kind of a hypothesis I have about the Project Phoenix thing that went on in Vietnam, as we covered in the last section. So it's going to be important that you're familiar with that material before we move on. You don't need to have the documents open or anything like that, and I'll provide links to everything that I'm referencing here in some of the little graphs. So ELF from Wikipedia is how they define it here. They just say it's electromagnetic radiation, radio waves with frequencies from 3 to 30 hertz and corresponding wavelengths of this, respectively, in atmospheric science. You know, so they kind of get into the whole thing involving Earth frequencies. They talk about, you know, things involving seawater penetration and things like that, because, you know, you can't really get through water with regular UHF and things like that the same way that you can with ELF. And it requires special frequency use. And so then you have electric power grids, which I think is really the takeaway from this more than anything, really. So it's to know that they define it between 3 to 30 hertz, even though it might cover different ranges depending on who you ask. And then 50 or 60 hertz is where electric power grids run through. Okay, so building on that, and I'll leave links to both of these, the brainwave frequencies, now they operate in the gamma range, right? The fluctuating frequency of oscillations generated by synchronous activity of cortical neurons, measurable with an EEG. Okay, so we've talked about EEG earlier in the presentation. Via electrodes attached to the skull, are conveniently categorized into general bands in order of decreasing frequency, measured in hertz as follows. So before I list these, I just want to say I believe that these are general. I'm not sure how much this falls into range with everybody, so I don't know who defines these precisely, but I know that these differ for different people, is my understanding, at least based on the things that I've read by most of the experts in the field. So you got gamma between 30 to 50 hertz, beta 14 to 30 hertz, alpha 8 to 14 hertz. I've discussed that a lot. Theta 4 to 8 hertz. That's within the Schumann resonance. Delta 0.1 to 4 hertz. Mu 8 to 12 hertz. Sigma 12 to 14 hertz. Sensory motor rhythm.
Guys, quick FYI. A lot of people consider alpha frequency, lower alpha frequency in the 7 to 8 hertz range, which is what I often quote. So even my information is not consistent with Wikipedia. There's a lot of different interpretations of it. So you have like these different forms of alpha state, and they cross over one another oftentimes. So again, for most people, yeah, alpha is pretty close to 10 hertz. But for others that are more psychic adept, they tend to be closer to 7 to 8 hertz or closer to theta brainwave state when they're in alpha state. You know, so they have a lower alpha state closer to theta. That's just the takeaway for that. Sorry to interrupt.
MR 12.5 to 15.5 hertz. So that's interesting, right? Because you have correlations here between electric power grids running in the gamma range of your brainwave, right? And we know that the Schumann resonance is between 8 and 14 hertz, right? So you have this sort of like, you know, right as the edge of your brain, your brainwave frequencies hits, that's where the power grid begins. And then somewhere in the low range of that, right, is where the Schumann resonance is. So it's kind of interesting. So thinking about that other concept of mass resonance and how that you have different groups who can influence one another via not just because of their perception, right? So this isn't just a matter of psychology when you discuss psychological warfare. When you say psyops, you're also talking about frequency. You're talking about perception involving light, vibration, and voice. And so when we're dealing with frequency and somebody runs a propagation or propaganda radio station, for example, it's not just that they're saying something, the message itself might be garbage. It actually might be that the frequency that they're broadcasting on is really what is doing it. And everything else is just a pattern. It's really almost irrelevant that what their message is might just be completely garbage to the conscious mind. It might be what the frequency does to the subconscious mind. And that's the only reason why I was thinking about that Phoenix project in regards to Vietnam and how they were discussing mass resonance, but redacting huge portions of the report. Because if you really get down to it, what they might have just been talking about is like, hey, let's just try out the same mix of frequencies that we know messed everybody up over here in this experiment we did on USS Eldridge and everything like that. Let's take all this data about electromagnetics and see if we can affect the behavior of all these people. And when they were tying that into the grid, right, again, hypothetical, theoretical, when they were hacking into that grid, they were trying to identify those that had spheres that were, I guess you could say, that had multiple DNA influence, right? So think of this as like a network nodal grid, and I'll get to another diagram in a bit with that. But I want you to start thinking about pineal glands, right, as in terms of having a transmit and receive path, meaning they're sending data that involves all these frequencies, right? And just think of the ELF range as our input-output between one another, the Earth, and everything above, right? It's our connection to all those things. But it's not the only element, right? Because we have other communication paths that exist in the upper high frequency range, UHF, and that's mostly been populated by consumer level devices that have replaced our organic, right, UHF frequencies that involve telepathy with inorganic methods that are involving digital modulation now. Most of them are involved digital modulation. They don't even coexist with our analog frequencies any longer, if you think about it. Before they coexisted, even though they were still bumping into one another. Now with digital modulation, they don't really even coexist. Not in a way that's harmonious, at least. So what does that translate to when you think about mass resonance? Well, I think it's important to read this part, right? So it says in physics, resonance is a phenomenon in which a vibrating system or external force drives another system to oscillate with greater amplitude at a specific frequency, at a specific preferential frequency. So that would involve, if you think about this resonance, mass resonance, right? And then you think about ELF brain entrainment, oscillation, brain entrainment, oscillation and amplitude, frequency brain entrainment. So if you hack one, the rest does itself, because this is a transmitter and a receiver. Get it? Okay. So the global electromagnetic resonance phenomenon is named after physicist Otto Schumann, who predicted it mathematically in 1952. Schumann resonance occur because the space between the surface of the Earth and the conductive ionosphere acts as a closed waveguide. I've discussed waveguide in another diagram, so maybe I'll link to those things involving the pineal gland in case you're interested in hearing my thoughts on that, but I don't think it's good to get into that right now. The limited dimensions of the Earth cause this waveguide to act as a resonant cavity for electromagnetic waves in the ELF band. The cavity is naturally excited by electric currents and lightning. Schumann resonance are the principal background in the electromagnetic spectrum, beginning at 3 hertz and extending to 60 hertz. Okay? And appear as distinct peaks at extremely low frequencies around 7.83, 14.3, 20.8, 27.3, and 33.8 hertz. So there's almost like I guess you could call it almost like harmonics to that, right? And if you study cymetics, I hope I'm saying that right, like where you place a bunch of sand on the drum, strike it, and then it makes this perfectly symmetrical pattern. That's sort of what you're talking about with the Schumann resonance in that same regard, right? And so when you take that concept, tie that into this, right? And remembering too, right, that they said it starts at 3 hertz, extending to 60 hertz. Now, what do they do here with our power system? Here's our
This part I think is especially relevant because of COVID and the lockdown. 50, 60 hertz power grids over amplified on people. I think right now I hear more people talking about feeling electrical and feeling electrical signals. And I don't think it's their imaginations. I think that a lockdown would be a perfect time for somebody to be over amplified and to take advantage of that time. And guys, you know, they called it Arkowitz. I mean, how else do I explain it to you? They have a nickname for it. And if they have nicknames like that for it, maybe they actually are doing it. Maybe think about it, guys. You know? You know, if you're not looking for it because you just think that anybody who perceives it is misperceived, then you're wrong. I've measured it, and I have considerable gear to measure it, to prove it. And I know what happens. And I've had it happen to me, and I've measured it happening to other people. I produce charts and reports and things like that that can demonstrate that it's happening. And I don't like using that word, but I have a concern right now that quite a few people may be experiencing electrical or magnetic or scalar or, you know, other types of anomalies that are energy related and blaming it on something else because it's a convenient thing to do right now. And, you know, I would urge you that if you feel more electrical, if it feels more like a kind of thing going on, then yeah, look into that, or at least consult with somebody who can put you on the right track to how to measure it for yourself to locate it. That would be my advice to you before you start, you know, getting deep into other types of things that it might be. I mean, look into what it actually is. I mean, look for the electrical signals, because I've seen them do insane things with electricity the last few years and make really horrible decisions on infrastructure that actually kind of take us back to the Stone Ages when it comes to the way the power is distributed. Even it's very weird, the kind of things they did, like in the state of California. Anyways, I don't want to get too deep into that because I'm not really that much of a power expert when it comes to the commercial side of things. But I've read enough about it or saw people that were credible to kind of go like, yeah, why would they do that? That would just dirty up the entire electrical grid. Well, there you go. They dirtied it up almost intentionally. So I think a lot of people are experiencing dirty electricity right now, especially in California. It has one of the dirtiest grids because of their upgrades, which were really downgrades, and people paid for that. It's bizarre. Anyways, I'm not, like I said, bad story to get into, but it is kind of relevant because a lot of people, I think, right now may be having energy symptoms and not aware. So just something that you may want to get another opinion on, again, for measuring it.
Our natural brainwave frequencies, right? So what's really going on here? Schumann resonance up to 60 hertz. It's been hacked. The grid's been hacked, both from the human level to the earth level. Not only that, so once that spectrum's been hacked, now you have a system that's transmitting, receiving on its own. Now you're in a loop. All this is just going in loops. So if you can reprogram one, just keep the flow, the momentum going, right? So it says in communication networks, a node is either a redistribution point or a communication endpoint. The definition of a node depends on the network and protocol layer referred to. A physical network node is an active electronic device that is attached to a network and is capable of creating, receiving, or transmitting information over a communications channel. A passive distribution point, such as a distribution frame or patch panel, is consequently not a node. Anyways, that's a technical. I just went down and looked up, you know, for computers, what is a node? But technology mirrors human consciousness, okay? It's not. So what I'm telling you with all this information is that we really don't have to decipher much, because all technology is doing is copying us. It's mirroring us. And so there was a designer, right? We know there has to be. And at some point, these things all just gained momentum, and now it's just it's a self-propagating thing where we've accepted these replications, these mirrors that just remove what we have and replace it with something that's digital and shiny that we can buy, but really denies us of our organic human experience. And that's, you know, that's my own opinion added in there. But when you think about it, so think of these spheres of influence and that flower of life, right? Getting back to the pineal gland, right? And remember, Pineal glands transmit and receive data from the entire spectrum. That's proven through EEG brainwave data, which operates within that Schumann resonance. We are Earth. Okay? Look at this. We're Earth. We're part of the Earth. This and everything beyond that. That's why this is so important, right? This research, getting back to Wilhelm Reich, deadly orgone, our chi, our life force, our labor, our intention, all of it. It's a grid network. If you hack one, you can crack into the next, then it gets momentum going. All these spheres influence the other, it moves on to the next, sort of like 100th Monkey, right? They learn it, moves on to the next on a subconscious level. It's telepathic because it's DNA, it's RNA. It's like you have bloodlines, right? And that's how this network pretty much, I think, ties together. This is why groups like the CIA are so interested in DNA, RNA research and hijacking all those companies and buying them out, right? Because they want to know how all these maps are energetically. They want to have that data. Because if you get one in the, that basically in a structured node system, if you can get this one, then it can influence these and all the way down the line. And mind you, there's dampering involved, like we talked about in resonance, right? Okay, so if you want to get back to this, it says resonance occurs when a system is able to store and easily transfer energy between two or more different storage nodes. Okay, storage nodes. Sorry. All right, resonance occurs when a system is able to store and easily transfer energy between two or more different storage nodes, such as kinetic energy and potential energy in the case of a pendulum. However, there are some losses from cycle to cycle called damping. When damping is small, the resonant frequency is approximately equal to the natural frequency of the system, which is a frequency of unforced vibrations. Some systems have multiple distinct resonant frequencies. So getting back to that chart, right? So think of all these things as, if you can lower one frequency, if you can bring, so say this is one is at, as a higher frequency, and you want to bring this down to a lower frequency because you're trying to damper the influence of this one down the rest of the node network energetically. If you know this is a DNA, RNA imprint that's very influential, then your goal, if you're a network hacker in human consciousness, would be to lower the frequency of this node so that it has less influence via momentum to get to the end nodes. If this one is operating at peak frequency, meaning you're at peak health, you're generating POR, you're getting sunlight, you're eating good food, all those things, right? Then you won't experience damping because you're going to be resonating at a higher frequency. And that's why it's so important to have all these mechanisms in place to hack that, to interfere with it, to prevent this grid from reaching out in its natural, organic, way that we did when we began, and we think of all these things in technology as progress, but it's not, It's a replication. We used to be able to do all these things on our own. We didn't need technology. That's why I want you to think about the flower of life, resonant frequencies. The humans broadcast extremely low frequency back and forth in this flower of life. Okay, as we're getting to this next material. So now this is the stuff that everybody in the conspiracy community is going to love. So we're getting on to Bob Beck. Now that you kind of understand what all this data means in a numeric sense, and you can get a better grasp on why ELF brain entrainment is so important, let's talk about methods, let's talk about devices and everything, okay? So I'm just going to start to read these things, and I'll interrupt it from time to time. I have a link to this below so you can read all of it from start to finish on your own. It's a really, really vital document to understanding this, I would say, so go to that document if you can and read it. Okay, so it says, this is from Bob Beck talking about various experiments they were using with extremely low frequency devices. So it says, we began using little boxes about half this size, and you'll see a picture of this one in the middle. It would alter that person's state of consciousness, and I was doing this before I began to realize the consequences of it. After a while, I'll tell you that we're not doing it anymore. The little boxes on the left. I'm assuming there was visuals with this original. There wasn't with the one I found. After we found that this thing could alter moods, the question came up, is this hypnosis? Suggestion? Am I a magician? Am I doing it? So it occurred to me that I'd carried this thing around me in my pocket. Now I'm a bachelor. I've been divorced for 20 some years, so I eat out 3 meals a day. So when I went to Denny's Coffee on Sunset Boulevard, I put this thing in my pocket, and occasionally I set it at a specific frequency that I'm not going to mention because I've been asked not to by people who can ask other people not to do things. And pretty soon, the waitress would start dropping coffee into the laps of patrons. The babies would start screaming. The people within a 10, 12-foot radius, that's a 20-foot room, would start freaking out. I surreptitiously turned this thing to 2 hertz higher in frequencies. A simulated sigh of relief. You could hear the room calm down. If you had a pocket Radio Shack decibel meter, the cocktail level effect, the volume of the conversation will drop noticeably at decibels. Okay, we had something here, and we knew the Soviet research had gone underground. Why the Soviet research had gone underground? At least the papers were no longer being published at the same rate that they were. The magnetic H wave penetrates everything. So I just want to say that that's very relevant there, because you have effectively one of the biggest experts in the field telling you that even back in 1978, he was talking about having a handheld device that could do this inside a room. Yet there's not a lot of known mechanisms that I'm aware of that can detect these things easily or know when somebody's trying to do this. So it seems to me that that would be an important thing to figure out. So it says the magnetic H wave penetrates everything. Our own government was playing at that time God, I guess, with the multi-billion-dollar Project Sanguine. Their purpose was to communicate with submarines underwater with ELF magnetic fields. The project was kicked out of Wisconsin, Michigan, and a few other places by people who had a certain nervousness about environmental disruption. They're trying to use power lines as antenna systems surreptitiously. Let's look at what they were trying to do so they could talk to the submarines this way. This is a better way of doing it. Frequency, less than 100 hertz. How's that for coy? The total length could be up to 1,600 miles long. Antenna line, okay, so we don't have to get into this, guys. So he's getting all the technical details. You can read all that on your own. Basically talking about how they were trying to construct these massive antenna arrays that could communicate underwater, and there's a precedence for this. If you look up Clam Lake in Wisconsin, that would be the reference point. I don't want to get into that whole story here. So it says the phase array antennas of the Russians. Although, just so everybody understands, I'm not trying to pick on the Russians or Soviets or anything like that, or at that time. I'm just using the Cold War in context of this discussion. So the reason why I think that's important is just because there's so much information going back and forth and things being hidden at that time, and that seems to be where all this data was just sort of effectively shut down and went underground, and it's very difficult to find valid data on it, but it's starting to come out. So it says the phase array antennas of the Russians. The first estimate of the Soviet transmitters that were causing problems at Riga and Gomel. I'd recommend you look up those studies on your own. It's pretty interesting. Kathleen Joyce donated her drill to the project, and we drilled 2 holes in a globe and put those 2 little tacks in it, so you have a historical little item there. If you draw a great circle route between these phase array antennas, you're in the area around Timmins, Canada. Now, there may have been some tremendous disturbances up there about a year ago that were traceable to this particular problem. Dr. Puharich was out there in California, and Kathleen Joyce and I hosted him. We showed him the apparatus. This is probably the first he had heard of the psychophysiological effects of the ELF fields. And I recall on your living room floor, Kathleen, where he flexed his muscle near the coil and saw the spike readout on this little oscilloscope and realized that we had finally had a detector in human captivity that could see micro-Gauss levels. In other words, his EMG, the few microvolts of potential firing through the nerve impulses through the conductive layers of the skin, was creating enough of a magnetic field to read out on this thing. So pretty interesting, huh? That means that they were fascinated by anybody that could do that. So I think that if you could demonstrate that you do that, and there's a test where you could demonstrate you do that, you might be able to show something. So he got very excited, so he began showing him some of my research dating back for about the last 8 years, and he decided that this was important enough to take back to the United Nations. So he contacted the chap who really runs the government. This man had survived about the last 5 administrations. He must have remained nameless because he is in very low-profile positions. I can assure you he is no one that you would have heard of about or read in the newspapers. They sent me an airline ticket and invited me to come back to the United Nations. Anyways, we'll get on to the next part here. So it says, Dr. Puharich's sophisticated Faraday cage. Dr. Puharich and I were supposed to have about an hour. It ran into 2.5-hour briefing. Kurt Waldheim was out of the country at the time, so our hosted chap that we informed was the number 2 man in the United Nations himself, Rudy himself. So now the experiments which caused all the excitement. Any of you guys ever been in New York, and seen this Faraday cage, the home of Dr. Puharich, 87 Hawkins Avenue, about 40 miles north of New York City? It was probably the most sophisticated cage in captivity. If you're not familiar with what a Faraday cage is, it blocks out radio frequency. It's there to protect and shield and perform tests so that you can see the true measurement of something inside of it without there being outside interference. So, for example, like there's a lot of people who believe they have implants and things like that. The only way to really prove that out, truthfully, would be to be inside a Faraday cage of a really good design, and then bring in a meter of some sort and perform that measurement or have some methodology behind it. So I just want to throw that out there. If you do believe there's something involving radio frequency in you, then a Faraday cage is the way to prove it out. But of course, access is a whole other challenge. But anyway, separate discussion. The thing, it says, okay, in other words, this has H-wave shielding and copper shielding for the E-wave Faraday cage. The thing probably has as much attenuation as one at MIT, the triple new metal cage. Okay, what we did here was we took this little box. This box has been disarmed. It is only mildly psychoactive. We did this at the request of the people who tell us to do things. This is the one. We placed it outside the Faraday cage. We sealed it up. Incidentally, the pickup, the magnetic pickup coil, is over here in this plastic garbage can filled with sand to act as a microseismic damper, so that we weren't seeing quite as much vibration. I think that's interesting about vibration, right? It's ELF frequency. We worked with several subjects, and this little box was run by one of Dr. Bruharich's secretaries outside. She was told to turn the dial a little bit, turn it on, don't tell us what's happening, turn it off, turn the dial to another number, turn it on, turn it off. Total double blind. No one inside the cage knew what was going to happen or when it was going to happen. The subject's brain waves were going to one channel on a chart recorder with zero crosstalk. The other chart with a tape recorder was going to a low magnetic pickup, so we could compare the brain waves of the subjects with what was happening magnetically inside of the absolutely airtight, secure environment. The chart readings, the one at the top and bottom, were 180-degree changes at the magnetic pickup. The center portion of that chart was a human subject's brain waves over the range of 6 hertz to 14 hertz. With some subject, there was 100% entrainment of frequency and phase. Get that. They locked on total. A little box the size of a package of cigarettes, when it uses the neural frequency principle, can entrain the brain waves of a subject inside a totally shielded room without his knowledge, consent, etc. That's what this is all about. Okay? There you go. What we're saying here by entrainment, if you look at the shape of the wave, they all fall in the same time rate. Starting from a half of a second to 4 seconds after the box goes on, the brain waves, the neurons are all being, it's starting, apologize, are being totally driven by this little magnetic oscillator. It is down below 25 nanoteslas at the source. A nano is 1/1000th of 1 Tesla. A Tesla is 10th to the 4th Gauss. This is interesting. I'm not going to get into this too much, but if you want to do some research on this study, back in March the 26th and 27th of this year, 1978, this guy, Mike Thiel, a journalist for in Eugene, Oregon, registered guard, decided to take his life in his hands and write about some of the things that have been happening up here. There's a whole bunch of ELF things that were going on, making people sick in Eugene. And I have something that I did on this, and I'll connect to it inside the comments or the description section so you can see it from there. So I'll link to that, and then from those articles, you can link to this. If that makes sense. Yeah, so I'm not going to go there yet. So there you go. That kind of ties together all these things, right? So remember what they said. For the size of a cigarette box, you can influence this little guy right here, the pineal gland. And remember, the pineal gland transmits data and receives data. So what Bob Beck was talking about was a device that talks to this, and this therefore sends out signals in return. And what he was telling you was that they locked on a signal. They changed their natural state. So if this person was naturally at 6 hertz, they changed to 7 or 8. They could do that with a small device inside a shielded room. Now, take that into context. If you're trying to do mass resonance technology, meaning you're taking that ELF resonance, you're taking that concept of the small cigarette-sized device in the shielded room and seeing ways that you can apply it in populations via devices. And I've seen a lot of evidence to suggest that this is very, very plausible, especially when you tie in the concepts of the Phoenix Project involving the mixture of 1680 and 403 megahertz, how that ties into energetics, and how that can manipulate these other types of, scalar longitudinal waves, right? Because there is the way in, I guess you could say, to this scalar longitudinal wave sometimes is via the electromagnetics, via the right cocktailing combination. I guess you can sort of hack these little, what do you want to call, bottles of frequency. Create these I don't know. I mean, you're talking about electromagnetics, which is space-time effectively. And so you can create these little loops and holes and rifts. It's possible, see? And that's important because if you do it to one energetic being with a very large DNA profile, so let's just throw out there as a suggestion, like a lot of people have, that Rh negative people have these really strong energetics. Well, you could say that that would make sense, right? Because if they're copper rich in blood, and copper is a transmitter, like in using cell towers or cable television or anything else, right? Copper transmits frequency. So it's a great conductor. If you're copper rich, then that means you're going to have a stronger imprint, right? You're going to be able to send out to here, to here, to here, and even beyond, right? Because you got to think about this as just continuing on and on and on and on. And depending on how strong this signature is, it's just going to keep going and going and going and going and going. Okay? Think about that. So why would mind control be important? Because you're working on mass resonance. If you know via your DNA RNA research that there's certain people here, not down here. This is useful though, right? You want to know where they all are. So you're going to map this all out if you're the CIA or whoever, right? It doesn't matter what intelligence agency or country you're from. You're going to want to know how this map works, how you can hack in, and where the closest you can get to a master node, you want to be there. Okay? If you can hack this, then you got all the rest of this. Then it's a matter of either, changing the opinions, changing the attitudes, changing the ideology, changing the perception of this one, and then that sends the information down the grid, the nodal network grid, that all technology is doing is mirroring within human consciousness. Think about resonance, the physics of resonance. Why it would be important to either, you have two methodologies at least, right? Well, there's a lot of ways in, chemicals, frequencies, belief systems, all of it. And that's how you affect this. And so they're talking about everything involving psyops. So psychological warfare is DNA, RNA, frequency weapons, frequency manipulation, ELF brain entrainment, MK Ultra, all of it. It makes sense. And to say it doesn't make sense is ridiculous. It really is. It's flat on its face ridiculous because all of these things have been going on back decades and we just became adjusted to it. They normalized it. And what you're seeing with culture now and films and media is trying to make everybody more or less fall in love with what was done to them. You ask me. It's been a decades-long program of stripping us of our natural frequencies, interfering with our organic processes, interfering with our organic thoughts, interfering with our organic energetics, which is the study of psychoenergetics when you get down to it. And that's all of this. This is psychoenergetics. It's a complex mix of bioplasma / orgone, DOR, POR. It's electricity, it's magnetism, and it's a dance, it's a play, vibration, light, frequency. This is what the pineal gland is. This is what the third eye is about. It's all a projection that we're sharing and contributing to, all of it. So if you hack one, you get to the rest. Okay? So that's the meat of everything here, but I'm going to do a little bit more into the ultraviolet and spectrum and talk about things involving terahertz and super high frequencies and the effects on other species, because I believe this should be discussed, because I don't think we should just talk about the humankind. I think we should talk about other species as well in relation to these studies and tests and the other possibilities of what might be going on. So that's going to be part 5. And thank you so much for listening. And I hope this resonates with you. And thank you. All right, welcome back. This is part 5, getting on to page 109. So I'm going to breeze through this material pretty quick here. I don't want to.
This is a pretty good presentation, but I'm thinking it's not going to make it if I play it all the way through. So I'm thinking not tonight on that one, only because it kind of drifts off outside the core topic that I've been talking about. So, by the way, since it's Friday, perhaps we can, try to have a little bit more humor entered in towards the end here. I'm not trying to get too off track and not talk business or whatever you want to call it here. As far as like, staying on track with everything, but what else did I have here? Yeah, I mean, I did do declassified docs, everything. I covered the topics that I said I was going to here. So, all right, cool. So we did get most of that done. I think if I expand on it excessively with the rest of that material, that's crooked. Sorry. All right. It'll just get it'll kind of make the material more scattered than it needs to be. So I can give you the playlist that for this entire thing, which I'll go back and do now. That'd be a good idea. And then if you go into the chat section, I left a really good link to a fantastic 70s film called Thank God It's Friday.
Part 3.
And
we're going to discuss bioplasma. And everybody, you might notice that I'm back.
You be quiet too. What the hell's wrong with you? God, dude. That's me. I'm talking about me. Sorry, guys. I'm making jokes about my own voice. Don't worry. I'm not talking to anybody in the room. All right. That's the playlist for controlled offensive behavior. The series that I was just showing you. If you want to watch it from start to finish, it's about 5 or 6 different parts in there, and I actually give you like spectrum analysis charts and things like that based on my own research. So it's a pretty I would say better than average as far as data-driven reports compared to most types of analysis you find of a similar nature. Like I don't just like look into these things. I bridge like a report like that. What I do with my material is I took like all of these other things that were like known within the Psi and alt media type communities as storylines or popular books or authors or whoever that maybe not popular, but to say that they're more well known in the more esoteric circles and people that just are in the know about these types of things. Like if you've seen me from the Basis Project, it'd be consistent with that type of audience, and so, anyways here, that material in particular, though, I really thought was good for like kind of bridging it all together to take like a Defense Intelligence Agency report that was declassified and then to say, okay, here's what one group says, here's what another group says, here's what another group says. And so like, like a lot of times you like, if you saw me initially from something like the Basis Project, and you were probably familiar with a lot of the storylines that were popularized over there. And so I've just learned that, yeah, sometimes I learned that, it doesn't jive with me. Doesn't mean it's not true or is or whatever. It just doesn't jive with me. It's not in my reality tunnel. In other cases, I find that there's somebody on there whose material or whose storyline completely synchronizes with something that I said. And I don't think it's occult mirroring. It just seems like they actually experience something very similar. And so there's this weird mix of these types of things that are going on out there. And what I've been trying to do is just sort of say, okay, look, I know there's some people that just sort of consciously manipulate and lie about these things. And I'm not really going to try to regard them or even try to like excessively out a lot of those people any more than I already do. I would rather just focus on providing information and sources of information and research that just validates and verifies better and more effectively and demonstrates that the people who do know what they're talking about, the people who have experienced something genuine, that they have like backup, they have materials that say, yeah, this is happening, that's not your imagination, that no one can take this away from you, that this is a genuine phenomenon that actually occurs within, this country that we live in right now. Yeah, we have people that steal Loosh, that steal human chi, that steal human energy, that do things to your human energy that can cause you ailments or illnesses. And there's also people that can do things that to benefit your health enormously. And it doesn't have to cost another person's their wellness or their sense of, health or whatever. That's the misnomer, you see. That's something that's being done in a malicious fashion that needs to change, but it's not going to change until we get more people to acknowledge that it's happening. And that's what all this equipment is about. That's what these sensors like this are about. That's what this camera is about. And see, you know what, guys, if you want to say that that's fungible, whatever, it's like whatever, then I'm going to add this meter. And then if you say that that's fungible, I'm going to say, well, fine, you know, you accept that I saw this signal, right? And this signal's too strong. And that's something that you accept as a radio frequency. And then you accept that I found on this meter that we had larger than average electromagnetic fields. And then, hey, you know, I was down there and I located some radon gas. You see what I'm saying? You have to be like looking for all the different things that could potentially be causing what's going on, and have the ability to, you know, like know what to go to next. Okay, so we kind of eliminated that thing. Let's find out what might be next. We eliminated that. Let's find out what's next. You know, just kind of move down the line and just try to find whatever's going on. But there's people that are experiencing some pretty significant phenomenon, and you know, I don't think it's really all their imaginations. I've seen, if I didn't experience some physical effects from these things myself at times, or actually have seen people or met people or actually measured what's going on with them, to know that, yeah, it does happen. And sometimes I think it was, how do I say this, guys? There's been times where I found out that it was happening to somebody, and even though I disagreed with the methodology that went about giving it to them, I didn't really care. Because I met somebody finally that, you know, was a lowlife enough to me to say, like, well, you know what, maybe you didn't get your judge, jury, and trial, but if you're looking for somebody to help you and advocate for you, it's not going to be me. I'll only do that for somebody that I feel like cannot control their circumstance, is innocent, and, you know, can't, again, people who really truly cannot control their circumstances. To me, the ones that initially would come to mind in that case would just be, you know, anybody who's in a vulnerable situation, who may be like, you know, physically disabled, or elderly, or underage. All these would play into a factor, which is why I'm going to warn you guys. They're typically going to fake conditions relative to disabilities, or pretend to have more significant things going on with them in the elder age, as a way to sort of get out of, just being straight up with you guys. The people that have been doing a lot of these activities, it's become kind of a go-to method of like, going, I don't know what's happening. I suddenly have an ailment. I can't remember anything. I can't go to court. You know, it's going to happen like that, guys. A lot of people are having some things brought to their attention, and they're suddenly developing ailments and illnesses and whatever. You're just going to have to like sort that out and figure out for yourselves who you believe and don't believe. But it's going to be more common, I think, also in Hollywood circles, where in politician circles and things like that, where people who have been kind of obviously found to be guilty of things, they're coming up with some pretty elaborate stages and setups to where they're just going to pretend to be mentally incompetent suddenly, or experiencing something of that nature. And that's going to give them the premise through which to drop out of society, political view, or, entertainment or whatever, and drift off into the sunset, where people will now be, again, in another layer of, aggressive, using political correctness as a weapon and faking things simultaneously in many cases. Yeah. It's going to make these people uncriticizable, because it's like you're picking on an old person that has an illness, or you're picking on a person that's disabled now. Why are you doing that to poor Joe Biden? Or, that kind of thing, guys. Like, well, he's a classic example. He's probably a lead figurehead of how they're going to be doing this across the board, guys. They do it that way. They'll have one person that's kind of there as it's a momentum play. They're the figurehead behind all these other people doing it. So if you think that guy doesn't have a lot to run away from, I mean, it's just like this whole thing with the Hunter Biden thing. I promise you guys, what you're going to learn about the whole Hunter Biden thing was that it was a lot of that was even putting it out in your face, a story that has some of the real details of what actually happened relative to the Bidens and Hunter in particular, but it's completely different. Not completely. No, how do I say it? There's elements of one truth mixed with an element of another truth mixed with another element of another truth. And they combine all of these different storylines into one that just is like, whoa, dude, he smoked crack and his laptop might be with the Russians and blah, blah, blah. He's blaming that, and he smoked Parmesan cheese. What the hell, man? And No, no, it's all distraction. I promise you. And they've mastered this, guys. At that level, they really have. They know now, and they've learned from Hollywood too, how to get out on top of these things. Have you ever noticed that, like, some of these, I'm not going to say which ones because I'm trying to avoid, more problems than I already have, but there's a couple of these like celebrities that have had like multiple sexual assault things going on, especially the ones that are into boys, like guys that molest boys and things like that. And so there's one in particular that kind of has learned the art of putting out another narrative simultaneously that nearly matches the one that most people have not heard. That way he can cover both of his whatever. So, like, okay, somebody will say that he literally sexually assaulted him, and that story won't see the light of day. It'll basically be covered up. That person, they'll be like, try to get somebody's attention on it, and everybody just be like, I don't hear you. I don't even know what you're talking about. I didn't see that. Who? Oh, a director who makes $10 million? No, I didn't see. I don't even know who you are. Oh, but that story over there, I'm definitely reporting on that one. Then the story that the reporter's actually going to select a report on is the staged one. It's a mirror of the reality. They're going to mix in details of the actual victim into the pretend one. The pretend one's going to come out and go like, I was assaulted by this $10 million director. It was the worst thing. Oh, it happened in Haiti. Not Haiti. How about Tahiti? Let's say Tahiti, someplace more realistic. It happened in Tahiti. Oh my God! It happened on this huge boat in Tahiti, and it was December of last year. And then it's going to be something that's this really outrageous story where he's going to say like, "Hey, man, my lawyer has all of my records. I was never in Tahiti. I've never been to Tahiti. I definitely wasn't there last year. I was filming this movie. Thank you. This is an outrageous story, and I'm offended. Just because I have a different lifestyle choice doesn't mean I'm doing these kind of things." And then they'll start to do this whole thing where they work your heartstrings about, their sexual preferences and things like that, which is, again, cover, guys. It's cover. People, look, I'm not homophobic or any of those types of things. Feel free to have your gender preferences. It's all cool. I'm totally cool with it. I've marched in a parade side by side with people that were LGBT. So it's really not about that. And I'm not saying that for street cred. It's just, I believed in it. When I was with them, I said, hey, these people, they need a little backup. They're being harassed at these parades. This was in Oklahoma. And me and this other dude, we were a little on the bigger side, and we were straight, both in relationships. He was married at the time. I had a girlfriend. But I'm just telling you, like, neither one of us felt like, it was a weird thing in the classic sense, except that we just wanted to, like, say that it was an okay thing. Mind you, guys, this is a while ago, a long time ago. It was like, it's been, man, so long ago. Not quite 20 years, but hell, when was that? It might have been like 2005, 2006. So again, guys, we'd grown up quite a bit as a country by 2005, but still, think about how far we've come with the way we perceive. Well, have we come very far, or is it we've kind of gone backwards? I don't really know. But just think about how our values have changed just even in a decade, relative to these types of things. That's all. And anyways, guys, I really don't want to get into a big, discussion about those types of things or whatever. It's just to say that, I think energetically, I totally got off track on why the hell I was even getting into this freaking topic to begin with. I'm sorry, guys. Like, what the hell did I go there for even? It's basically just kind of let people know, man. Like, when I get into this topic sometimes, it's mostly because I'm concerned a little bit that part of the reason why we have things going on at the level that we do is a destabilization agenda, social engineering, cultural engineering as a way to sort of change our culture and to create confusions of these natures. They want gender confusion. They want us to not understand relationships between men and women. They want us to not get, they would prefer, honestly, guys, this is the only thing I have a problem with. It's one thing to be accepting and to be cool, or just to be like, yeah, that exists. There's people that have a same gender preference, and exist to have relationships. They deserve to have relationships like everybody else. That's cool. I'm like, that's to me where I leave it, you know. When it gets into this more like sophisticated form of like trying to like program people into being a certain variation, that's when I'm going like, you guys are taking it a little far. Whoever's doing this, you're definitely getting into the realm of programming children to be something other than they are. That's when I'm pissed. It's just like with everything else, guys. Like if everybody's just like doing drugs amongst adults or buying guns back and forth between adults, I'm just like, I don't give a shit. Whatever, you guys do what you do. I don't care. But then we start getting to these other types of issues where I'm kind of going, guys, you can't just do that to a kid and expect everybody to stand back and go like, hey, everybody, that's the way that we raise this. No, 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 no. Yes and no, but you're taking it too far. You understand that? To me, like if Charlize Theron adopts a black child from Africa and brings him to the States and tells him when he's 3 years old that he's a blonde-haired, blue-eyed adult woman, and that it's okay to perceive himself as she, her, and white. Yeah, I think that's wrong, to be honest with you. That's just my opinion. And I'm a pretty understanding person. Because that kid is too young to make the decision that they're a blonde-haired, blue-eyed white woman. Horseshit. Sorry for my language. I don't believe it. I don't buy it. And the more I looked into her and saw her coziness with a Nazi Italian designer, the fact that he had been publicly found twice in France, a country that finds you for anti-Semitism, any public displays that that are even close to it, you like, that's like a severe crime. And he did it twice on camera in front of people, telling people that he loves Hitler. He hates Jewish people. He was telling these people at their table that they're ugly and Hitler should have gassed them and all of their relatives. This is Charlize Theron's buddy who led her fashion campaign at the fashion company that she was with when she was like, you know, selling Jeux d'Oeuvre or whatever perfumes, you know, and while a whole bunch of other celebrities had the decency to scold this, you know, action and say, at least, even if they were trepidatious at first or reserving judgment, which is understandable until more details are available. But once they were in, yeah, even some people that were spokespeople for the company went out and said, man, that guy said some Nazi things, man. I'm not supporting him and I'm not okay with him and I'm not going to work with him. And that was cool. To me, that's guys, because this wasn't normal. This wasn't like somebody who said something that was a little off kilter. This guy straight up looks at these people and says, and tells them to their face that he wishes Hitler had gassed their entire families in hopes that they all die. I mean, guys, that's very Nazi. It doesn't get much more Nazi than that. How do you get any more overtly Nazi, you know? So, but you know, then you took it to the extreme where she put a blonde-haired wig on this little boy, and then puts pink and purple dresses on him and puts him out in public, you know, and so he's a black child. She brought him from Africa, and the culture over there, as I understand it, basically because of the history relative to South Africa, the culture that she's from, she's South African. And, you know, the way that that's perceived over there, my understanding based on the documentary filmmaker, I would need to have more validation on this. But the person who made the documentary was black. And it was their suggestion that a white woman who's South African adopting two boys who are, quote, Afrikaans, as far as like with the K's and the double A's, you know, like of a group or of a specific type, that they're kind of royal of sorts in a way, and that what she did relative to their genetics or something to that effect is very offensive to those people, like her adopting them and of all the people, and her bringing them all the way over to the States, and on top of that, telling the boy that it's okay to perceive himself as a blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman with long blonde hair who's white. Yeah. Oh, and hey, everybody, he made this choice consciously, so let's all respect it. He made this choice. So you guys, Don't be homophobic. Don't be, I mean, they're going to come out with all the, and I'm like, you guys, this isn't being homophobic. Guys, and I'm just telling you, like, if you didn't know about that, why? And then beyond that, don't you get that you can associate what I just told you to so many of your movements right now and how they're getting funded? I'm just going to say this to my black friends out there. Please understand this. If I say something that contradicts, some of the things, please know that, I was a lot of my cultural influences were informed by, I mean, across the board, politically, literature, everything, in a sincere way, guys. I really did. And a lot of cultures, not just African American, black culture in general, but things relative to that experience. Sure. I read a lot of Dick Gregory when I was younger. That's why I thought it was cool that Killer Mike, Run the Jewels, was quoting him all the time. I was like, wow, that's awesome. That's a great man to quote. I would say to anybody, I don't care where your political perspective is, you should see some of the interviews with Dick Gregory before he died. Amazing. This guy really had it. He had it. He knew everything. We talk about disclosure. Wow, dude. Dick Gregory knew everything. How he knew it, where he learned it, I don't know. It could have all just been from his experiences or whatever, but I know that he had a serious download and he was really spilling. So towards the end of his life, I'd say, yeah, check out his interviews, definitely. But we just, guys, we got to stop getting hoodwinked by these people who don't care about any of us. And I just don't like seeing them use people. I don't like seeing them co-opt these movements and get into everybody's, and get everybody arguing and getting everybody into this occulted nonsense. And I promise you guys, some of these narratives, I'm not going to get into it, but they really are getting you into a thing that's making you argue. And a lot of these things are being staged to get you to argue, to get you to march. Why are they doing that to you? Why do they want you pissed? You have to ask yourself, guys, why do they want you mad? Why do they want people mad at you? Why do they want you at odds with other people in the community? Why are they trying to create more and more characters that polarize you against people that maybe you would get along with on Twitter and things? Because that's what I keep seeing, just back and forth, bam. I don't even like getting into it. So, don't take the bait, because these people, they don't care. They don't care about any of us. Just, learn to see the signs of Nazism when it's there. So we all got to get out of this this little MK trap that they've got us in here, seriously, together. And we have the ability to do it. We have the strength. We've survived many things historically. See, we have a good history of persevering over these types of things. And right now, what we really need is a unified front. And that's why these bloodline families, they really have their roots in Nazism when it's all arguing, guys. So let's not do it. All right, let's all just, be cool, figure it out together. We have the ability. We really do. And it's not benefiting anybody to see these communities destroyed this way. And the people that I see leading that pack are usually not, people that are genuinely protesting right now. They're the ones that are trying to destabilize these neighborhoods and make it to where you don't have anything to buy. You have to take a bus to, or drive clear across town to get your to a store, because all the ones are broken around you. See, that's why they really do these things, guys. They want that to be your outcome, that want you to live with. And then they replace it with something that's more expensive, where people don't want to invest. You need to think about what they're really trying to do right now. Any short-term gains you might think that you're getting, I promise you the long-term losses that you're going to take as a result of trusting these people, I know from personal experience. So, all right, folks. Thank you for sticking around tonight. I appreciate it. I really do. Have a good evening, and thank you for joining.